You can't see the forest for the trees, and you can't smell your own on your knees.
Some of the most famous fashion designers in the US today have been asked to forecast what Eve will look like in AD 2000. One idea is a dress that can be adapted for morning, afternoon, or evening. It's the sleeves what does it. According to another artist, one dress of the future will consist of transparent net. The net probably to catch the males. Apparently in AD 2000 we shall be having a hair-raising time. Yet another designer goes so far as to believe that skirts will disappear entirely. Shoes will have cantilever heels, and an electric belt will adapt the body to climatic changes. The lightly clad woman of tomorrow, ooh, swish, will move in an atmosphere that's scientifically kept at the right temperature. The future bride in a wedding dress of glass. What the groom will wear, apart from a worried look, isn't mentioned. A dress of aluminium, with a sash to change it for afternoon or evening, and an electric headlight to help her to find an honest man. As for him, if he matters at all, there won't be any shaving, collars, ties, or pockets. He'll be fitted with a telephone, a radio, and containers for coins, keys, and candy for cuties.
Well, in the year 2000, I think I'll probably be the spaceship to the moon dictating robots to robots. Or else I may be, I don't know, in charge of a robot court, judging some robots. Or I may be at the funeral of a computer. Or if something's gone wrong with their nuclear bombs, I may be sort of coming back from hunting in a cave.
I don't like the idea of sort of getting up and finding you've got a cabbage pill to eat for breakfast or something.
Well, I think all these atomic bombs will be dropping around the place. And one will get near the centre, because it will sort of make a huge, great big crater. And then the world will just melt, and the world will become one vast atomic explosion. And it will become like a supernova, stars.
Some madman will get the atomic bomb and just blow the world into oblivion.
There's nothing you can do to stop it. The more people who get bombs, the more somebody's going to use it one day.
Well, I think that it'll be so overpopulated that there'll all be wars, all nuclear explosions and everything. It'll make the Earth, too much radiation on it. It'll become too hot to live on. I think that there'll be no life at all, really, on the Earth.
I don't think there is going to be atomic warfare, but I think that there is going to be all this automation. People are going to be out of work and a great population. And I think something has to be done about it. If I wasn't a biologist, that's what I'd like to do. To do something about the population problem. Try and sort of temper it somehow. I don't know how.
I think it'll be very dull, and people would all be squashed together so much there won't be any fun or anything. And people will be rationed to the amount of things they can have, because if they had too many things, it would just squash their houses, and there just wouldn't be room for them.
I think it'll be people will be regarded more as statistics than as actual people.
I don't think it's going to be so nice. I think sort of all machines everywhere, everyone doing everything for you. You'll get all bored, and I don't think it'll be so nice.
I think it's going to be very boring, and everything will be the same. I mean, people will be the same.
A few years later.
One issue that really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population. The benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, which then has this effect of reducing population growth. The key thing you can do to reduce population growth is actually improve health. Population growth in poor countries is the biggest problem they face. We're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. Then we've got to make sure that we help out with the tools now so that they don't have an impossible situation later. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial.
The United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing world population.
The population cannot continue to grow indefinitely.
Really set the course for moderating the population growth between 2050 and 2100.
It's recently held in a secret meeting, a private meeting in New York City. ABC's John Berman has the scoop on who was there and what was going on.
A secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful people. Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey, together with others at the meeting, including George Soros, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller. They're worth more than $125 billion.
Welcome to The Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism.
Every now and then it gets to me. Maybe it's religion, the moaning and the bitching, lying and the stealing and the cheating politicians coming right at me through the satellite feed. Make this day easy on me.
Welcome to The Independent Review, live on AM wake-up channels on Rumble, Odyssey, Rockfin, and also streaming on the Indie News Network Twata channel. Let's jump right into this first clip.
All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, the U.S. has launched 750 airstrikes on Yemen. So a U.S. official has told ABC News that the U.S. has launched about 750 airstrikes on Yemen since March 15th. a relentless bombing campaign that has failed to deter the Houthis and has taken a heavy toll on civilians. U.S. airstrikes hit multiple provinces in Yemen on Thursday, with at least 3 people wounded by U.S. attacks in the morning that hit the capital, Sana'a, and the northern Sadr province. U.S. airstrikes on Thursday night were reported in the provinces of Marib, Sana'a, and Amran. So daily bombing continues. And so, I put in some background in this article, stuff that if you've been listening to the show, you're very aware of. But it's important, I think, to stress how resilient the Houthis are and how easy it was to predict that bombing them, that you couldn't bomb this problem away. So the Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, they survived a 7-year brutal Saudi-UAE war that was backed by the U.S. from 2015 to 2022. The bombing campaign that Biden launched against them from January 2024 to January 2025 did nothing, only escalated the situation in the Red Sea. The only thing that was able to stop Houthi attacks on Israel and Red Sea shipping that they started in October 2023 was the Gaza ceasefire that went into effect on January 19th. After Israel violated the deal by imposing a blockade on humanitarian aid and all other goods entering Gaza, the Houthis announced that they would reimpose their blockade on Israeli shipping, and it was in response to that announcement that the U.S. began bombing Yemen again. So Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi said on Thursday that the new U.S. bombing campaign has failed to impact Yemeni military capabilities and that a blockade was still in effect for Israeli and now U.S. shipping in the Red Sea. He said, quote, "The ships of the Israeli enemy, along with the Americans, have become completely absent in the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, the Gulf of Aden, and the Arabian Sea. And there is no navigational activity of the Israelis and Americans at all, but there is a complete halt," end quote. He also pointed to the fact that Yemeni air defenses have taken out multiple U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drones, which are worth $30 million each. And they shot down 7 in the month of April alone. And the Houthis have also continued to launch missile and drone attacks on Israel and on U.S. warships in the region. The U.S. has been bombing Yemen using 2 aircraft carriers that are in the region and B-2 bombers stationed at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. The Pentagon has shared virtually no details about this war, which is completely illegal. It has not been authorized by Congress. And it's likely that the bombing campaign has already cost billions of dollars just in over a month. A senior member of Ansar Allah's political bureau has said that the Houthis would stop attacks on U.S. shipping if the U.S. stopped bombing Yemen. There's no sign that the U.S. is considering that offer because this is really about Israel, really about ensuring Israel can continue its genocidal war in Gaza. That's what this is about. And of course, we say this is a failure. There's also people that are profiting from the U.S. using all these munitions, using all these weapons. But the whole thing, the really shameful part about this, there's a lot of shameful aspects of it. But the fact that it's gotten such little media coverage here in the U.S., people just simply don't seem to care. Maybe because the media is not telling them to care. But, Axios had this story today about the bombing campaign, and it said, the title was something like, "The U.S. has been quietly bombing Yemen." And it is just unbelievable. Again, you got 2 aircraft carriers, B-2 bombers, just launching airstrikes day in and day out against this country, and people just seem unaware, or again, like they just don't care. All right, so the next one here: 3 Senate Democrats challenge Hegseth on Yemeni civilian casualties. So 3 Senate Democrats have sent a letter to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to challenge him over the high civilian casualty rate in the U.S.'s bombing campaign in Yemen, which the Trump administration launched on March 15th. U.S. airstrikes on Yemen have hit residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure, taking a heavy toll on civilians. According to the count from the Yemen Data Project, at least 63 civilians were killed, and including 11 children, and 150 were injured by U.S. strikes from March 15th to April 15th. In that same time period, I saw the Yemeni Health Ministry at one point say that something like 120 civilians were killed. But then in other releases, I saw them say that, a similar number, and say that it's mostly civilians. So not exactly clear what their breakdown is. the Yemen Data Project, their numbers are conservative estimates, so it's civilian casualties that they can confirm. So at least 63 civilians killed in that first month. The real number is probably higher. And then on April 17th, as I covered, that horrific bombing of the Ras Issa fuel port in Hodeidah killed 80 people. And as far as I can tell, that's civilian workers and a few paramedics that were killed when they responded. And the U.S. did not even claim that they were bombing a military target. They said they were bombing a fuel port, said that the Houthis were profiting from fuel. And of course, this aid groups warned that this strike on fuel infrastructure could push the millions of Yemenis who are facing food shortages into famine. You see this picture here is from last month, a boy who was injured by a U.S. airstrike in Sadr. So according to the Washington Post, Senators Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, and Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, said in a letter to Hegseth that such a serious disregard for life calls into question the Trump administration's ability to conduct military operations, quote, in accordance with U.S. best practices for civilian harm mitigation and international law, end quote. The senators asked Hegseth to account for the number of civilians killed already and asked him to describe what efforts the Trump administration has taken to mitigate civilian harm, if any. They also asked whether the Pentagon was even tracking civilian casualties in Yemen. So the Washington Post, they reported on this letter. For some reason, they didn't publish the whole thing. It's annoying so I didn't have access to the full letter. At this point, it might be available, but when I was writing this, I couldn't find it. But based on the Washington Post report, they're pointing out that there's civilian casualties, but there's no sign that they're saying that the U.S. shouldn't be bombing Yemen. So I think this makes a good news story for us because it draws attention to these civilian casualties, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like they're challenging the president's authority to bomb Yemen, which again, under the Constitution, it's completely illegal. No declaration of war from Congress or anything, didn't even get an authorization from Congress. So I'm hoping to find the full letter to see what they really said here. The next one here, Israeli strikes on Gaza kill 48 over 24 hours. And just a warning, a pretty sad, horrible photo in this story here. So Gaza's health ministry said on Thursday that Israeli attacks killed at least 48 Palestinians and wounded 152 over the previous 24-hour period as the relentless U.S.-backed Israeli assault on the besieged territory continues. The health ministry said that 2 more bodies were recovered from the rubble. So you see this picture here, 2 dead children at a hospital morgue being mourned by family members. And many children were among the victims of Israeli strikes on Thursday. According to Al Jazeera, 3 children were killed by the bombing of a tent shelter in Nuseirat, central Gaza. 4 children were also reported killed by an Israeli strike in Gaza City, which also killed their parents. Hani Mahmoud, a reporter for Al Jazeera, said, quote, witnesses, neighbors, and those who are close to the family, as well as surviving family members and civil defense crews, had to collect the flesh of the children, their limbs that were blown into the streets and neighboring residential buildings, end quote. And I don't know if it was the same strike, but I saw just a horrific video from Gaza. I think it was in Gaza City, of a child on a roof who's injured, all bloody. And you could see someone, like a just completely mangled corpse next to him. And then the camera moved and you could see a child like blown in half. I mean, just day in and day out, this is what our government is supporting, just the mass slaughter of children in this such brutal, barbaric way. And according to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, at least 10 Palestinians were killed in Gaza City, in all the different strikes. Medical sources told Reuters that Israeli missiles hit a police station near a crowded market in Jabalia, northern Gaza, killing at least 10 Palestinians. According to Wafa, a total of 18 civilians were killed by Israeli strikes on Jabalia. So since March 18th, was it March 18th? Yeah, when Israel resumed the bombing campaign, completely broke the ceasefire. At least 1,978 Palestinians have been killed, so almost up to 2,000. All right, so the next one here is...
Now we take a look at this clip from The David Knight Show.
The new White House website has declared that COVID escaped from the Wuhan lab. Now, you know what escaped? These criminals who locked us down escaped. They've escaped any accountability by pushing this lie about COVID escaping from the lab. Look, it's not even a question anymore. We knew this from the very beginning. I said from the very start, I said there are no excess deaths from this stuff. Said, yes, the excess deaths have gone up, but they've gone up because they're killing people with Peter Navarro's ventilators, the same genius behind this tariff lockdown that's going on. They're killing people with the ventilators. They're killing people with remdesivir. They're killing people by denying treatment for them, killing people by denying safe and effective and inexpensive treatments if they had a respiratory disease. And so that's why we saw excess deaths going up. Well, you don't have COVID? Sorry, you can't come to the hospital. We're not going to help you. And you let people die. Or you push them away until they get really sick, and then when they bring them in, they put them on a ventilator and kill them. So that was what was happening. So we saw a small uptick. This is not rocket science, folks. It's a flat-out lie from the White House. They're now selling it. This is something that was sold by the people like Alex Jones and others who are pushing the panic because they wanted to sell you storable food and, yes, masks. You had Alex and you had Mike Adams selling masks to people. Give me a break. What are you talking about? Crass commercial exploitation. But anyway, they were pushing that kind of stuff, and they were pushing this narrative. And we knew that the real dangerous thing was going to be the vaccine. And when the vaccine comes out, you can see the excess deaths just go straight up. Massive spike. Massive spike. Trended up a little bit because of the medical, not even malpractice, but maliciousness, just like we were talking about with Scott Schara and his daughter, Grace. Just malicious what they were doing. Maliciously murdering people in the hospitals and being paid commission to do it. Oh, you identify somebody, we'll give you a cash bonus. And we'll give you 20% bonus on everything that you do to them. And so, yeah, it went up a little bit with that, but it spiked because of the vaccine. And so the guy who's the father of the vaccine, the guy who locked us down, the guy who pushed out the ventilators and the remdesivir and all the rest of this stuff and boasted about how he shut down the FDA doing even the most minor due diligence. Now, his White House has got a website dedicated to the propaganda lie that there was some kind of pandemic that escaped from the lab. It's insane. The site is now dedicated exclusively to detailing evidence of the true origins, quote unquote, of COVID-19. And so they list 5 arguments. They say the virus has biological characteristics not found in nature. Prove it. Have you isolated it? No, nobody's isolated it. That's an absolute lie. They don't know what it's got. They haven't looked at it. They haven't got an isolated version of it. Christine Massey pointed that out. The Baileys, many people have pointed that out. Oh, well, you talk about that. Now you're the crazy conspiracy theorist. They want everybody to believe that it was, wild and it was organic and all the rest of this stuff. And they were shutting down during the Trump administration. They were shutting down people who said that it was manufactured. Now they want you to believe that it's manufactured. Why? Because it allows them to escape if it escaped. Nobody's bad. Not going to blame anybody, right? Not going to go to war with China over this. So it was just an accident. And, of course, we had known for many years how bad these biosafety level labs were and how they were doing gain of function. And there was no reason to do gain of function. That was shut down in 2014. And then in 2017, when Trump got in, they started it back up again. So why'd you start it back up again if it's dangerous? They would say all COVID-19 cases stem from a single introduction of the virus to humans. Again, prove it. I can show you the excess deaths, and I can show you that the excess deaths came when you rolled out the vaccine in country after country. Your vaccine did not escape from the lab. It was engineered and it was planned, and you're the father of it. So it's the vaccine that killed people. The lab in Wuhan, China, where the virus first appears, has a history of conducting gain-of-function research with inadequate safety and so forth and so on. So why did Trump restart these gain-of-function things in 2017? And why is it that they're now saying, well, gain-of-function, that's dangerous. It could escape from that. So why aren't you shutting down gain-of-function? What does that tell you? That tells you that they want to run this game again on you. They're going to continue their gain-of-function stuff, and they're going to tell you at some point in the future, it escaped from the lab again. So sorry, we did the best that we could, but now you're going to have to do this and do that because we tell you so. They want to keep this thing going. All of this tells you, you don't have to do a detailed chemical analysis of this. You can just look at their actions. It tells you everything that you need to know. And unfortunately, this is coming out now from Children's Health Defense. They've joined the mass alibi, just like RFK Jr. has. And just like the 9/11 official story that we began with, this is the other shoe to drop. They use that 9/11 thing and the Dark Winter simulation to get the Patriot Act, to get the laws at the state level to allow Trump to do what he did in 2020. This is a long-term plan, folks, and you can see it rolling out still in the Trump administration as the White House is doing this. Nearly half of Americans believe that COVID-19 was deliberately released. 66% are confident that the virus originated in the lab. We got a lot of work to do. It's been an uphill fight to try to convince people of 9/11. The leaders will never admit what they did, but we need to keep pushing to stop this. And so when you go back and you look at what happened with this, the exaggeration, the panic that was involved. This is an article from Alan Roberts. He said the COVID-19 pandemic reshaped the world, but beneath the surface of public health directives lies a troubling question. Did officials deliberately exaggerate the virus's deadliness, in order to control population? Well, of course they did. They even told people that you could get sick with an asymptomatic infection. They even threw aside their whole virus theory, their whole contagion theory. Well, you can get sick from somebody who doesn't have any symptoms, and your vaccine isn't going to protect you, and natural immunity doesn't work. You got to get the vaccine. All of this stuff is one lie after the other. It's kind of like buildings falling into their own footprint that weren't even hit by a plane. It just goes on and on.
Next, we have a couple clips from Macroaggressions with Charlie Robinson.
Well, we did this an episode similar to this a couple months ago called 1948. And because there was so much going on in this one year that it was important, I thought, well, let's just drill down on everything that happened in that particular year. We're going to do it again right here with 1973. There was a lot happening behind the scenes. And, the 70s, it was a weird era. And, the 80s are known for being like the era of excess. I think the 90s and have their own sort of theme to it. The 70s is disco, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I mean, it feels like, I was born in 72. This year that we're going to be talking about is just a couple months after I was born, and there was as Alex Jones would say, it's all happening, man. It was all happening in 1973. You'll be blown away with how much stuff was going on there. So we'll do that. We'll talk a little bit about some of the maybe not so important, but interesting components of what happened. We'll get into the oil shock. There was a whole lot of fuckery going on in the Middle East, not the least of which was being controlled by the same cast of characters these days. We'll talk about Vietnam a little bit. What sort of groups were being formed in this particular year. There's one that's super dangerous and extremely relevant that came into being in 1973. And we'll wrap up with what was going on in China. So I guess put this in the proper context. If you're not old enough to really know what was going on during that year, or maybe you weren't even born then, that's cool. You don't need to know a ton. I'll explain what I can. But I think it's important to kind of set the scene as to what America was going through in the run-up to 1973. We had just devalued the dollar in 1971. That's when Nixon took us off the gold standard and put us on the petrodollar standard instead. That's extremely important. It was a huge monetary shift, a monetary reset. It was theft, of course, but you know, the least of Nixon's problems was the theft. Was the creation of this floating fiat that was backed by maybe oil, probably the U.S. military. I don't know, however you want to define it. But you certainly couldn't go redeem your dollars for gold, at least not in the United States. I think maybe you could internationally, but not in the U.S. And we had Vietnam was both ending during a ceasefire and continuing because it lasted 2 more years in 1973. We had the Paris Peace Accords where Kissinger was pretending like he was a humanitarian and going out there and trying to convince people to to stop this war, a war that he started, and push for peace, because Henry Kissinger was so concerned with world peace as he's depopulating the African nations and South Asia. Just a couple years later, you remember his National Security Council Memorandum 200 came out on December 10th, 1974, so it's just like a full year after this. So he was a big player at this time, and arrangement. He's an economist, and he is, he is held in high regard in the Austrian economics world. David Ben-Gurion, founder and first prime minister of Israel, died in 1973. Finally, a horrible human being, possible lizard person. LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Zionist traitor to the American people. He died in 1973 of natural causes, I suppose, before somebody could throw him forcibly out of a window. They certainly would have good reason to do that. We had The Godfather won Best Picture, which is hilarious. And let's see, what else was going on this day? Oh, not political, but interesting to me. Major League Baseball institutes the designated hitter in 1973. This was good. This was good for my family friend, close friend, Don Baylor, who won the 1979 MVP with the Angels, and later was nice enough to employ me with the Rockies. Skylab is launched so that NASA and all the Nazis involved in NASA could continue to launder millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. I think the number I came up with was somewhere like $53 million a day currently that NASA gets. NASA, never a straight answer. Need another 7 astronauts, that group, the ones that are green screening, space shuttle, everything, the ISS, all that stuff, and NASA, remember them? DEA was created by the drug-obsessed Richard Nixon. He was, talk about a guy who needed to sit down and just have a couple bong rips. Richard Nixon. Probably be pretty fun to get high with Richard Nixon now that I think of it. But at the time, he was so anti-drugs. You know, and whenever there's somebody who's like really hardcore anti-something, like, you know, like some guy who comes out and is like, we got to get rid of them homosexuals, you know, they're an abomination and everything. And then you go pull up his browser history, you're like, oh, okay, right, I get it. And yeah, you're a closeted. Well, speaking of feeling better and the medical industry, I'm excited to talk to Zoe Smith. We're going to talk about her book. Hey, Zoe, good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's great to reconnect with you. We had a chance to talk at the American Liberty Awards in Austin, Texas. We're coming up on almost 2 years ago.
Yeah,
for that one. It seems like only yesterday. And you've got a book that is going to get you in a lot of trouble, but those are the kind of books that we like because
exactly. I'm already in a lot of trouble.
With the book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
Website. So the most entertaining part is, my book's been censored, incredibly censored, even before I published it. But even after, so the self-publish went out on September 13th, I think was the day that I booked it. It was like a Friday the 13th. I thought it was perfect for a medical cult book.
Yeah.
And the night that it launched, the credit card processing magically turned off on my website. My web host managed to ghost me for an entire 2 weeks on any of the fixes that it needed, and it got attacked by bots that night too, all kinds of stuff. And so like the following day when everyone was going to look for the video and going to look for the book, they couldn't reach my website because my website had gone down for part of it because of the bots attacking it. Then I got it back up and the credit card processing wasn't working for the first weekend that it was out. Then I got that working, and web browsers and antivirus software are targeting my website, continuing to this day, saying that my website is dangerous and it will infect your computer with malware and viruses. So I had to actually submit tickets to like Norton Antivirus and McAfee Antivirus and put in false positive reports saying that I've ran a virus scanner on my website. There's no malware, there's no virus on my website. You're giving a false positive. And I had one of them come back and say, okay, we've removed the false positive and people can now get to your website. But Norton and McAfee, if you have those antivirus software on your website, or on your computer, you're probably not going to be able to get to my website. And that's the only place to get the book in print right now. So I realized that's a bottleneck, and that's why they attacked me so much at that bottleneck, because that made it so like the main product that people wanted, the in-print version, they can't get it if they can't get to the website. So then I have to use the platforms where I can't make as much and they can censor it.
I appreciate the irony of a false positive with regard to your book, too.
I know that you can't make this up.
Well, let's get it out of the way right now. What is the web address? What is the best way to get your book that we're
the best way to get the book is to go to thrillkillmedicalcult.com, like it says in the sign up there. I had a banner made for when I do in-person signings, so you'll see that out when I'm doing stuff. So yeah, thrillkillmedicalcult.com. That's where you can get pretty much all the stuff. All my interviews, articles, research articles are on there. The summary of the book, everything except for the audio book version. That's only on Substack right now.
And what's your Substack?
Oh, zoe.substack.com. So
cool.
zoe.substack.com.
Nice. Well, you've already got everybody's attention now by talking about how banned it is. So let's get into this. What happened to you? What happened to you to make you want to write this book? Because everybody's got something. There's always some trigger that makes somebody say, I think I'm going to sit down and write a book. And then you get done writing the book and you go, my God, that was incredibly grueling work. I don't know if, at least in my case, I don't know if I would have done it again if I knew how hard it was. Of course I did do it again because
totally.
You get a bit addicted to it. But the idea of sitting down and writing a book, there's got to be something that made you say, I have to do this and nobody's going to stop me. So what was it?
Yeah. So after I had quit working for the medical cult and I was trying to opt out and I had gone off grid. I was learning to farm. I bought a tiny house so I could hopefully put it on property and like set myself up on like my own homestead or move it into a community of other like-minded homestead or something like that. Like I wanted, even long before I got out of the medical cult, like that was my ideal goal, was to get to a point where I'm producing some amount of my food and I don't have any debt and I own my own property and I have people around me that I trust and are supportive, like a community. That's what I was trying to create even before the pandemic. So then after that, after I'm starting to do it, I'm talking to other people in the medical freedom community, leaders in the medical freedom community, and they don't know some of the stuff that I know and they weren't able to put all the pieces together. So every person I talked to, I could share something that like helped connect different things or reveal something that kind of made them look a little further than what they originally thought, like the media or even the alternative media was telling them. And they all thought like, I have the ultimate truth and I really know what's going on. And then they talk to me and they're like, I need to learn more, apparently. So as that started happening more and more and more, I thought, you know what? Everything in my life has set me up for this. Like people have told me they really like my writing. People have told me I have a way of explaining really complicated things to people. Like in my coding job when I was training people, my trainees would come to me and say, you were able to make this make sense to me, whereas no one else ever could. And I thought, you know what? I have the skills and I have the time right now. I might as well put everything. And then actually I lost my cousin like right around the same time. And I thought, yeah, I'm the person that needs to write this book because my voice is different. I have all the skills that I need to do this. I really never thought in my life that I was going to sit down and write a book, but the more I thought about, well, how do I get my message out there? I thought, well, no one knows who I am. If I put a video out there, like the chances of it going viral and anyone seeing it, like that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I knew you couldn't just like reach out to Alex Jones and say, hey, I'm a whistleblower. Can I come tell my story? It doesn't work like that. So I thought, well, who's ever going to listen to me? And how am I going to preserve this for generations down the road? Because like we all lived through this, so we all have some sort of perspective of what happened. And so that maybe people who live through this don't necessarily need to read the book. I think there's a lot of information in there that maybe they weren't exposed to, which is the reason why I wrote it. But more than that, like everyone has their own life experience to fall back on. But our kids maybe don't have that adult experience, and then our grandchildren won't. And so how do I preserve this information in a way where it will be preserved, and so maybe someone can squirrel it away and hand it down to them, so when their kids are asking them what happened, when they hear in school or they hear somebody out in society saying there was this COVID thing at one point in time, hopefully it's over by then and it's just like a weird historical event that maybe was censored, and I'm 100% sure they're going to censor it and twist the story. So I wanted to provide some alternative perspective that might stand the test of time that could counteract the main narrative.
Thanks for watching that clip. If you want to hear the entire episode in audio format, just go wherever podcasts are served, search for Macroaggressions, subscribe to the show, and please rate it when you get a chance. Thanks, everybody.
Next, we have this interview with Ryan Christian and Robert Ingledesh.
And so the opposition isn't great enough to force Israel to stop immediately. So what it's doing is it's now starving the population of Gaza, preventing all aid from coming in. We're in the 8th week of no aid, no medical aid, no food aid, nothing coming into the Gaza Strip. Collective punishment. They're now frequently every single day bombing Lebanon as they're bombing Gaza, of course. They're running a military operation in the northern West Bank. They're still discussing annexation of the West Bank. They're ethnically cleansing people from East Jerusalem. And of course, they're inside of Syria now. They've expanded their territorial domain, and they don't have any evidence. He hasn't committed a crime. He's exercising free speech. This is something that is enshrined by the Constitution in the very being of what America is supposed to be, right? You have freedom of speech, that you're allowed to voice your opinion. Even if everyone hates those opinions, you're allowed to say it. But it doesn't matter anymore because, again, Israel said this guy's Hamas, they can kill him and 20 other people next to him. Doesn't matter if he's a journalist and they killed, women and children next to him. They accused him of being Hamas. And now in the United States, they accuse you of being Hamas. They accuse you of being an anti-Semite. And suddenly then they can persecute you. They can take you to court endlessly. They can kick you out of the country. They can send you to some facility. And now it's getting even worse because we have this case of now Trump talking about putting people, U.S. citizens in El Salvador.
Right.
I don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but it's scary because who are they going to come after? They're going to come after political dissidents.
Welcome to The Last American Vagabond. Joining me today is Robert Ingledesh to discuss some of the updates on foreign policy that may have been lost with all that's going on in the world today. And just really kind of following up on what has been going on in the larger, kind of as I see it, the Greater Israel Project, the ongoing execution of invasion of territory, land grabs, destabilization in multiple locations, the ongoing genocide, as I would call it, in multinational genocide. And now, right now, what's going on in the United States, I see as a very clear constitutional crisis, a lot of dangerous moves being made by just the government. It's, at least in my coverage, forced us to, cover this more intently. And a lot of what's going on in foreign policy is at least not getting as much coverage. So I wanted Robert to come on to update us on, the kind of unfortunate realities of what is going on currently in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and everywhere else. So Robert, how are you today? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back on.
Yeah, man, it's been a minute. It's and I want to start by just saying that in general, that Robert and I were just talking off the air. We will get back to a point where Robert's going to be doing much more continual work for The Last American Vagabond. But of course, my opinion, that's exactly what the entities out there trying to suppress us and attack us and sue us frivolously wanted, was for the content to diminish. But we're not going to stop. So, and just let's start with this general conversation point. And I think this is this is why my mind, goes to Greater Israel. I mean, you take it wherever you want, but I mean, it's infuriating. And in a way, it's vindicating for those that might have been saying this, that have been kicked back on. But the idea that Israel now, just as of, I think as of yesterday, saying that they will, even though I'm sure we could have seen these statements in their Knesset before this, will remain indefinitely in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. And I put this out. I just said, we tried to tell you. I mean, it's been right on there. So go wherever you'd like with this. Just, that general direction on where Israel is playing this out.
Well, as a more general comment, Israel is certainly seeking to expand its borders. It's openly doing that now. So, people for years called everyone who brought up the Greater Israel Project a conspiracy theorist and said, this is like not based in any reality. But of course, it always has been, because there was a crisis in Zionism. And a crisis in the Israeli overall ideology and goal and direction of the state. And we saw that manifesting itself prior to October of 2023, when the Gaza genocide began. And of course, with the Hamas attack that preceded the genocide. So that sort of just opened up Pandora's box, and the blow that was dealt to the Israeli military, to the sense of national security, of the mission of the state, were all put in jeopardy. Really, this boils down to what was happening prior, again, going back before October 7, to the judicial overhaul push by Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition. We have to remember that in less than 4 years, there were 5 elections that took place. The Israelis couldn't put together a coalition government that would be sustainable. Netanyahu even lost power for about a year briefly, where Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett took over from him. And when he came back into power, he had to use the settler movement, which he had been throwing his weight behind since he was first elected prime minister in 1996, which was also a very consequential election for the Israelis, because that's when the political system underwent a change, which took away power from the big parties and put them into the hands of smaller factions, which Netanyahu has successfully played on. We had to think of Netanyahu and his influence over Israeli politics as a man that's been there basically on and off for 3 decades now. So he has shaped Israeli society. He's shaped the political system. And then when he grew desperate, he used the most extremist hardline settlers who previously their parties like Otzma Yehudit, who is commanded by Itamar Ben-Gvir, the current security minister, was banned. In 2019, the head of Otzma Yehudit was banned from actually running and holding a position in the Knesset. Now, these are like they are crucial to the government. So when Netanyahu came in, understanding the crisis that had befallen his own political career, but also the Israeli political system as a whole, used these hardline factions and then attempt to change and overhaul the Israeli judicial system. Mm-hmm. And the Israeli opposition, it split the society down the middle, basically. The opposition and those who are on the side of maintaining Israel's still Jewish supremacist, it's still an apartheid regime, but what they would call a liberal Western-style democracy, right, which is somewhat secular. They were scared that that was going to be taken away from them, that the system was going to be Judaized, that it was going to be made into a more theocratic state. Mm-hmm. Because if this judicial overhaul occurred, Netanyahu was going to be able to change laws, right? And change the way that Israel functions. Israel doesn't have a constitution. So Israel based its legal system and its basic laws on the British system, and the British system drew from a lot of what was there already during the Ottoman period. And so there was this crisis of what Israel is, where it's going, and on a strategic level, in the long term, something fundamentally had to change. So with Netanyahu, the second October 7 happened, he started blaming his intelligence communities. He blamed the Mossad and the Shin Bet. He later apologized because of the backlash, but this already caused the schism. And then throughout the course of the war, as the war crimes intensified and Israel eventually launched a full-scale attack and killed 3,000 people in Lebanon. Later, we saw them expand into Syria, as was noted here in this article. They're expanding their territorial gains, expanding their borders, which they still haven't declared. He was eliminating all this opposition. An emergency war cabinet was created at the start of the war, and that factored in people like, for instance, Benny Gantz, who's, he used to be the defense minister. He's a military guy, right? He's actually integral to, the Israeli system. He's somebody important and experienced for them. Also, people like Gadi Eisenkot were included in this, again, as well, somebody with that military background. He basically forced them out and dissolved the war cabinet. And then we saw, as time went on, he would remove more and more and more. This is Netanyahu and his regime, remove more and more of his opposition and opposing voices. Yoav Gallant, his defense minister, he resigned. Later on, we would have, obviously, these steps taken, like him wanting to remove Ronen Bar, the head of the Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence services, and he's sort of in a battle with them at the moment, with the Shin Bet and elements of the security state. And then as well, even with this new chief of staff for the Israeli army, the Israeli military, he's basically reshaped the high command. And he removed even the spokesperson. I'm forgetting his name now. There is a list guy.
Dan Hagari.
Yeah, Hagari. His name just skipped me for a moment. He was essentially forced to resign. He was pressured to resign because he was having problems with Netanyahu. So he goes ahead and he's removing all of these people in his way and then surrounding himself with loyalists. And because he's surrounding himself with these loyalists, they'll do basically whatever he wants. There's one problem is the extremists are too crazy for him and they want him to go further and further and further. The other issue he has now is because his army was not prepared for a long, sustained campaign on multiple fronts and has now been severely weakened because of it. For instance, there's 100,000 Israeli reservists who are refusing to return to duty. We've now got this letter that's signed by at least 10,000 Israeli soldiers, both active duty, but mainly reservists, calling on him to do a ceasefire deal because the Israeli society is asking for a prisoner exchange. That's why they want a ceasefire deal, not because they care about Gaza. They couldn't give a damn about Gaza according to all of the polling data and, just common sense looking at what comes out from their media internally, their discussions that they're having. But this is sort of what has happened during the course of the war, which has made it more extreme. With the collapse of Syria, and it enabled the Israelis to go directly into Syria. There's really no opposition other than some local militia forces who want to defend their villages in places like Daraa. But there's no real opposition to these aims. And then in Lebanon, with the catastrophe that had befallen the country, in particular Lebanese Hezbollah, with the assassination of its senior leadership, the pager attacks and everything, Hezbollah was forced to basically sit back, try and recover, and not fight a war that would just be endless and pointless and drag Lebanon into a situation where maybe we have 20, 30, 50,000 deaths in Lebanon. And so now they're not going to do anything, for instance, Hezbollah, until they have a plan that is going to be able to achieve specific goals. They're not just going to fight for the sake of fighting, and they can't fight for the sake of fighting. It's just a bad idea for them. And then in Gaza, of course, Hamas has never been capable alone of defeating Israel. It just can't. It just doesn't have the military capacity to do it. It can fight and it can resist like it does. It can ambush Israeli soldiers when they come into the populated areas and attack them. But, with very limited weapons, with light weapons that have been domestically produced. And so the opposition isn't great enough to force Israel to stop immediately. So what it's doing is it's now starving the population of Gaza, preventing all aid from coming in. We're in the 8th week of no aid, no medical aid, no food aid, nothing coming into the Gaza Strip. Collective punishment. They're now frequently every single day bombing Lebanon, as they're bombing Gaza, of course. They're running a military operation in the northern West Bank. They're still discussing annexation of the West Bank. They're ethnically cleansing people from East Jerusalem. And of course, they're inside of Syria now. They've expanded their territorial domain inside of Syria. And there's no hope, it seems like in sight for them to want to stop. They have to be forced to stop, which could happen. There could be developments which would force them to stop. But at the moment, they're rampaging through multiple countries and even threatening that they might enter Jordan or Egypt next, most likely Egypt.
And of course, if the U.S. government truly wanted to make them stop, they could, right? I mean, and this is the reality. So this is why the complicity needs to be it needs to be seen that this is the U.S. and the U.K. and other countries that are actively a part of this, not just, standing by and watching. The complicity is very clear. But so to bring that back up, the point again is that so they are now saying they're going to indefinitely remain in these countries. So I mean, there's no legality around this at all. Like this is exactly what we were talking about from before. This is illegal occupation, and this is exactly what gives these territories the legal right under international law to attack, whether or not they're attacked. And yet every time they play this kind of cycle of where that's terrorism. So, but back to the point about the judicial reform. I thought this was interesting. So this is from 2018, and I pointed this out before about where this is a Canadian Supreme Court justice basically saying that if this happens, that they will not have an independent judiciary. And what's important, I think, is important is that the argument of why the ICJ, ICC kind of the like Lindsey Graham in particular, plenty others argued they couldn't go after Israel's because they had an independent judiciary. And what's interesting is this was the claim in 2018 that should this happen, that wouldn't exist anymore. Now, as I understand it, this has already largely happened, right? And it's even in 2023, hundreds of Israeli reservists were saying they wouldn't go to service if they did continue to pass this. And even today, the same thing is happening to what you're saying. It's an ongoing crisis. But so where is the reality of that? Judicial overhaul? I know there's multiple aspects of this, and I know in many cases this has already happened, correct?
There were a number of bills that were being passed and throughout the course of 2023 up until October 7. This was like the big thing for the Israelis. Like you noted, there was these massive protests. They were weekly protests, sometimes even more frequent than that. Some of them, garnered over 100,000 people that would protest in the streets in Tel Aviv and lock down roads. Even the top Israeli labor union, the Histadrut, had got behind an effort for a general strike. So this was serious. And like you noted with with that article, there were elements of the reserves who decided, that they were going to protest against this, and even some people active duty in the military. And this got the full backing of the opposition, of course. And they passed bills like, for instance, the reasonableness clause, the reasonableness bill, which was essentially this bill that they were pushing through, and it received a huge amount of backlash, was to prevent the Israeli Supreme Court, which basically acts for the Israeli political system as a moderator, it stops it from going too far, and it sort of it creates like a buffer. So that the political, whatever government is in place, right, cannot just push through an agenda if it has a majority and completely change what Israel looks like. And so this prevented the Israeli Supreme Court from jumping in and saying that's extremely unreasonable as a law, right? It's not grounded in Israeli law. And so we're going to challenge it and we're going to block it. And of course, this bill would enable a number of things. A lot of people, especially on the Israeli side, were going, well, this maybe means that Netanyahu personally can pass through bills now that can benefit himself when it comes to his corruption trial. So it had a personal aspect there, and people were very much opposed to Netanyahu because of that. What we saw with October 7 is that it shifted in terms of the focus. They were not focusing on this judicial overhaul anymore. because of course, what was in front of them was more urgent that they needed to address. But now, funnily enough, with the expulsion, the firing of Ronan Bar, the head of the Shin Bet, it appears that because the Supreme Court has blocked it, if Bar does not decide to step down by himself, there could be now a situation where the Israeli government is dragged into the judicial realm, and we have this battle between, again, the judiciary and the Israeli government. And so we could find ourselves back in, the situation where it looks like this is now the conversation of the day, the Supreme Court versus Netanyahu, basically.
I was just going to say, it's very interesting to see how many overlaps there are with many other, I would argue, authoritarian governments in similar ways, even in the United States government, with the discussion with the courts and I argue the way that the system's essentially meant to work, whether or not they're politically motivated, and so essentially abusing that to argue they should be removed, or in El Salvador, where he removed the justices and put people in place, or in Honduras, where they did the same thing before Prospero was put in place. Very interesting how many, I see it all as kind of the same agenda. I just wanted to point that out, the overlap of it all. But you mentioned the funding, or the settler aspect of that, to where, and you brought this up many times, you've written articles about this for TLAB. Very interesting to see that he clearly leaned into kind of the most radical elements to gain that power with the radical parts of their government, which is you've explained well, which is kind of why he has power today, right? The Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, settler movement, which you were talking about. So what's interesting to me, the overlap to that is, hopefully people out there are very aware today that Israel had been funding Hamas to some degree or another, basically up until October 7th. You can prove this with different statements, funding. The nuance there is discussed. We, get into that, but the idea is that clearly this was not for aid for many reasons. But the interesting part of this, good. You have a comment? Go ahead.
I just dispute that the funding that went to Hamas directly from Israel, there were a few $100,000 sent back in, I think it ended in the early 80s. To an organization called Mujama al-Islamiyya. The Mujama was like the precursor organization to Hamas. So Hamas, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, means the Islamic resistance movement, was different to the Mujama. The leadership was the same, essentially. But what happened is they turned into an armed group. The Mujama was strictly against violence. It was against armed rebellion against the Israelis. It pushed its Islamic message and was a social group, essentially. It looked at building the Islamic civil society sector. It focused on, building mosques and schools, and it wanted to Islamize society. That was its goal. And it actually opposed another group called Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which at the time in the early 80s basically had street clashes with these Mujama activists because they were essentially saying that, we need to do non-violently. We can't attack the Israelis, whereas Islamic Jihad said, no, it's our mission to defeat Israel and liberate Palestine. But when Hamas became Hamas, and also in the mid-1980s, the Mujama started transporting weapons into the Gaza Strip and formed what was known as Al-Majd, which was a security apparatus for Hamas. When that happened, the leaders of the Mujama, like Ahmed Yassin and others, were arrested, put in Israeli detention facilities. And then in the first Intifada in 1987, Hamas became a thing. In 1988, it really started operating. It put out its charter, not to go through its entire history, but the financing that came through to the Gaza Strip was not from Israel after that. It was from Qatar. Right. And so there was this period where what happened is, after 2018, where Hamas prior to that had tried diplomatic initiatives, for instance, with the Palestinian Authority, to have them take over the Gaza Strip. They even signed an agreement in 2017 to do that, but it failed because of Israeli and U.S. pressure to make sure that that wouldn't happen. There wouldn't be a unifying of the territories. And then it threw its weight behind the nonviolent movement, which was created in Gaza, called the Great Return March, which started on March 30, 2018. And it stopped fighting Israel during that period, by the way. Israel was bombing Gaza at that time. It was killing hundreds of civilians, but shooting innocent people, injuring tens of thousands. But Hamas stepped back and it didn't do anything. But the problem was, the Palestinian Authority at the end of 2018 decided to stop paying the salaries of people in the Gaza Strip. And so the salaries for many of these people who are aligned with the Fatah party, which opposes Hamas, in Gaza, this was something that was keeping them afloat, economically. When that was starting to be withdrawn, there was suddenly this crisis. There wasn't as much money in the Gaza Strip. Salaries weren't being able to be paid. There was more restrictions. In 2017, the Saudis, UAE, and others enforced a blockade on Qatar. And so Qatar as well was being pressured not only to stop its financing of Hamas, which historically it has done, not in the form of these cash in suitcases handouts, which would come later, but it was forced to stop its financing of Hamas, which meant that Iran could come in and take over that role more. But also it was being pressured to even close down Al Jazeera. So there was this enormous amount of pressure on Hamas. Hamas, with a renewed leadership, was in a very difficult position. So the Israelis decided to do a number of things. One of them was to allow more workers from the Gaza Strip to obtain permits to go on the Israeli side and work on the Israeli side. Another thing that they did, for instance, is, they periodically opened the fishing zones further so people could fish further, small little restrictions. Then the major thing that they did were these, multi-million-dollar cash handouts to Hamas, which would come through the Erez crossing. At first, they were in suitcases. That was the way that they just bring in suitcases of cash. The Qatari officials would get off the plane from Doha. They would go straight to the Gaza Strip and hand this over to Hamas.
Right.
Now, the statistical breakdown, because Israel uses this to claim that they were taking that money and funneling, I can't remember exactly the statistic, I think it was 6 million or 4 million, to the Qassam brigades, which is the armed wing of Hamas. What really happened is all of that money, according to all of the mainstream accounts of what was happening to that money at the time, was that it was not being handed over to the armed wing. But of course, it was helping Hamas because Hamas used that money to basically subsidize fuel, to pay salaries, to do the things that have been taken away. Mm-hmm. The reason on the Israeli side to do that was to stop there from being some conflict breaking out at the time. They weren't prepared to go to an all-out conflict. There was no reason for it. It was in a very precarious political position. And so Netanyahu endorsed this strategy, very backdoor, dirty sort of a way of transferring. But that money was from Qatar, not Israel. Israel didn't fund Hamas.
To better flesh this out, the argument is, and thank you for the nuance is important. When you're making I wanted to get into, and we'll go into next, was the relevance of how often that's happened through the U.S. and Israel of funding radical elements, right? Settlers, Hamas, so on. But to better flesh this out, what I find is important. So this is what the way I'm framing this is the idea that we have things like this where that they are in a part of this process. Now, I'm not saying you can argue for what form it ended up in, right? But simply that we know that you have examples where Israel through Mossad is facilitating the process of some measure of funding going to Hamas. I think that's very relevant. So the why and how of it, which I'm sure you know more than most, I think at the end of the day, you don't, like, for example, the election process in 2006. I still argue I don't think it makes sense to me that they would have allowed an element to, people that they're calling terrorists to elect people they call terrorists. You see what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, I don't know, because I feel like it makes sense that the information that we see shows that there was an election, and I'm not going to dispute that Palestinians could have and have the right to choose whoever they want. But it's just an interesting kind of self-fulfilling prophecy as you see this go forward, or the many examples that I'm sure you're familiar with. This one, for example, where Haaretz told us right after October 7th that he made very clear that they need to continue to transfer money to Hamas to make sure that they're divided. Things like that show you that there is an element of this, at least him stating publicly, for the getting money in the hands of the group that they claim they're fighting to keep them divided. So things like that. Or I might as well just play the clip since we're talking about it. And
just as a brief note, that's from 2019, just to clarify.
Yes, for the podcast, very much so. I'll read the direct quote. I'm just skimming over it since I've mentioned this so many times. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. He said this to his Likud party in the Knesset, in the Likud party's Knesset members in March 2019. This is part of our strategy, and he goes on to make it clear, that that's about dividing them and in a surreptitious manner. Then and I'll play this too since we're talking about it.
So are you saying Benjamin Netanyahu deliberately boosted Hamas to try to prevent a Palestinian state?
Yeah, sure. He deliberately and systematically even told on record, whoever wants to avoid the threat of a two-state solution has to support my policy of paying protection money to the Hamas.
So what we did, with the permission of our Prime Minister, is to let Qatar to transfer a huge amount of money in cash, probably more than $1.4 billion. By doing it, we increased the power of Hamas. We did everything in order to make sure that Hamas will go on controlling Gaza, and Palestinian Authority will control the West Bank, so they will fight each other.
Now, of course, these are people with their own agendas. Ehud Barak is no one that should be trusted, right? But nonetheless, the point is that the overarching idea is that money was facilitated into the hands of Hamas. And I think that's very relevant. Now, the nuance, people can feel free to fill that in for themselves. My point is simply just that if we know that to some degree, there's at least the question of to what the intent is and whether or not, especially with all the foreknowledge and all of the weirdness around October 7th, the question is posed, I think, is whether or not there's something to that. And go ahead, you have some comments, but I'd like to go into the overarching point of just the general idea of funding, your own enemy for the purposes of manipulation in a way. But go ahead.
I completely agree with the assessment that this was to divide the Palestinian territories. I think that's an established fact that has been the agenda, to divide the territories. They wanted to keep, and this has been a policy position which we found out through WikiLeaks documents in the early 2010s. It was released that the agenda was to keep Gaza on a diet, to keep it basically on the barrier of the poverty line, to squeeze the population, to get them to rebel against Hamas, basically, but to just keep them right there, essentially, but not collapse the territory completely, because then that would beget armed action and armed conflict. And they didn't care to do that. And they knew through armed conflict they can't defeat Hamas. As we've seen over the past 18 months, they haven't been able to defeat Hamas. They just haven't been able to do it. So there's a few different elements here. Number one is those Israeli politicians and those Israeli, former leaders in the intelligence community, and then also Ehud Barak, a former prime minister. They have an anti-Netanyahu agenda. You'll hear that Ehud Barak, he said, we transferred the money to Hamas, which is obviously not accurate. Then afterwards, now you're hearing the former head of the Mossad say, no, we allowed Qatar to transfer the cash, and it's 1.3 billion. It wasn't 1.3 billion. I don't think it was that much. But regardless, that's beside the point. There's an agenda to divide the two territories, for instance. That's why, for instance, Israel has not allowed as a political solution for the Palestinian Authority, which is incredibly corrupt, by the way. And works with Israel in security coordination and does not fight Israel, and is financed by the United States before the U.S. is pulling out some funding now, but the United States and mainly the Europeans who finance the Palestinian Authority to be like a domestic security service for the Palestinians in the West Bank to take the burden off of the occupying forces. But they didn't want the Palestinian Authority to go into Gaza after the war as a settlement for the ceasefire settlement, and they also didn't want it to happen in 2017. That's why they axed it in 2014, when Hamas and Fatah, the Palestinian Authority led by Fatah, came together in 2014. Israel launched a military assault, a 51-day war against the Gaza Strip, trying to uproot Hamas. Again, they failed to do that through military means. And what had happened after that is their failure to uproot Hamas completely, and the armed wing at least, and to limit their ability to be able to launch rockets and do things which are a nuisance, but they don't really do that much. But they're still a nuisance, right? And obviously Hamas has the capacity to inflict some damage on the Israelis. Not that much. It won't take down Israel, but it will, cause a domestic crisis. It will cause a stir. A rocket going into Tel Aviv, it's a problem, even if it doesn't do anything. Like Ansar Allah now fires its missiles at Tel Aviv. They don't normally hit anything, but it's still a huge problem. The sirens go off, crisis. So after, this situation where Hamas is basically trying everything to try and hand over the authority to somebody else, to govern Gaza. Do something to make the living conditions better. Israel
what year are you talking about here? What year are we at? What you're describing?
We're at like 2018,
Okay,
tail end of 2018 here. Hamas had basically been put in the position where it tried diplomacy, it amended its charter, it tried nonviolence as a strategy even. It even endorsed nonviolence for a while. It had tried, even if you look at its 2017 charter, it talks about perhaps accepting a two-state solution. Hamas would be able to accept it. Obviously, they have stipulations about what that two-state solution looks like, of course, but they had the idea that we'd accept it, right? If it meant that it could be a prolonged, ceasefire, at least in truce with the Israeli side. We don't want to recognize Israel, but we'll do a two-state solution so we can have a prolonged truce. I won't go into the ins and outs of that, but it shows a level of moderation that they had. And they were trying to move towards something different. And look, the situation in Gaza, you had to realize that by 2020, even before that, was called out by UN officials as being unlivable. The situation then was extremely dire. The unemployment rate was through the roof, one of the highest in the world, especially amongst the youth. There was, the people had nothing to do there. The majority of the population was dependent upon humanitarian aid. 97% of the water was undrinkable. The situation there was horrific prior to October 7. So Hamas, being this political leadership, and again, this goes back to something, I know this is sort of a little bit complex, but it's really important for the context. You said about in 2006 them being allowed to run, and that's weird that they're allowed to run. Well, interestingly enough, George Bush is the one that encouraged the election to happen. And then on top of that as well, the MI6 was the one pushing and pushing and pushing. Hamas, you need to go, you need to run. And Hamas at that time had thrown its hands up in the air and said, no, we're just about armed struggle. We don't care. But they ended up being pushed into it. And then when they won, it was the perfect excuse, right? Because, of course, the Palestinian Authority was led by Fatah. It being taken over by Hamas, they were never going to allow. They can say, look, a terrorist organization took over. To be clear, though, every single Palestinian political party, other than the mainstream branch of Fatah, are considered terrorist organizations, whether they be Islamic parties, nationalists, socialists, it doesn't matter. Like, they're all terrorists.
And whether they are or not, to be clear.
Of course, this is the thing that it is quite a nuanced history. But that 2006 election, instantly there was a blockade imposed upon Gaza, not just by the Israelis, but an economic embargo put in place where they put sanctions on from the European Union and from the United States, which squeezed Gaza. Then, of course, what was going to happen? What did they do? The Bush administration, which we found out through Vanity Fair, many people had their suspicions about, but we found the details out with the Vanity Fair article, endorsed basically through ferrying weapons through Egypt and other countries, and sending cash through to the head of the then Preventative Security Force head for the Palestinian Authority, Dahlan, Mohammed Dahlan, tried to launch a coup. Hamas saw this coming and they purged the Palestinian Authority, created what was known as the Palestinian Civil War in 2007. And then Israel imposed this full-scale blockade. And then that led to all of these wars. And it sort of led to the position we're in today.
Now, let's take a look at this clip from the Indie News Network.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers, the best. Alright. So, 2 chats. I know there's some people hanging out over on the Rumble. Go Start, this is insane. They're rating college kids over protests. That is correct. We've talked about that a few times. They're going to continue doing that. Spirit of the Age, Go Start, hanging out on the Rumbles. We got over on the YouTubes.
So Bad Wolf on YouTube said the old work is dying. I think the old world is dying, and the new world struggles to be born. Now it's the time of monsters.
Yep.
Yeah. Who
saying
said that?
Gramsci, the guy Sachs.
Yeah.
Like World War I philosopher.
Okay.
That was being quoted.
Angel, fellow colleague in INN, also said, what I'm concerned about is if the U.S. is willing to go to war if the world order that the U.S. imposed after World War II is threatened.
Yeah, which they've already been doing.
Right.
So,
Desert Mantis in chat. China is a speaking giant. Let her lie and sleep, for when she awakens, she will astonish the world. Napoleon Bonaparte. Let's see anyone else. Sean in the chat, thank you for your donation earlier. Said, imagine if the West lost World War II, how different would all of this be? I'm sure it'll be another power that would be kind of like the main power now. I don't know, like,
yep.
You maybe somewhere in like China already, possibly, maybe, but I can imagine that, like that hole would be filled by another country in some way, shape, or form. I would imagine. So let's see.
Well, there's a whole argument whether China's capitalist or not, how that figures into everything. But, I mean, you've also seen us try to meddle in their affairs as well, just in case,
Mm-hmm.
So...
Chris H. in chat, India is the I in BRICS. They help create BRICS. You have to meet some prerequisites to join BRICS, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
I think that's GDP related.
Yeah. Money.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind,
again,
BRICS is just an alternative to the World Bank. That's what they've, like they've given more power to the individual users than the World Bank has, for sure, seeing as how U.S. has, like, the power in that situation. So, I mean, it's a slightly more democratic in its makeup, but...
Sure.
So I'll give it that.
It doesn't matter when they utilize the same practices as the West, so...
Yeah.
Whatever. I think that's it.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Cool. Well, let's get to our next one then. So we've talked about the persecution of people supporting Palestine in multiple places, in multiple situations, especially with the protests happening here and Trump deporting people and things like that. So I figured we should...
But this story is more in Europe.
Yes.
Like what's happening in Europe regarding...
Yep.
Any protests in Palestine.
I have this from the Electronic Intifada, David Cronin. Cops in Brussels seize Palestinian activists on the city streets. So, not doing well there. He writes, the arrest of the Palestinian activist Mohammed Khatib in Brussels fills me with fear. It fills me with fear not only because I know and like Mohammed Khatib for some time, I've been worried about the threats right-wing Belgian politicians have been making against him. It fills me with fear because this could be the start of something bigger and far more abhorrent. Khatib was seized by police after he had left a demonstration against Israel's genocidal attacks on Gaza. Think for a moment about what signal that sends out. Cosmopolitan liberal Brussels is a city where the cops can grab people with dissenting views as they walk along the streets. Although Khatib was released early the following morning, we can be sure that the story does not end here. The newly formed Belgian government has made it clear that it wants to ban Saimadoun, the group which Khatib represents. Saimadoun has long been in the crosshairs of the pro-Israel lobby, which falsely depicts the group as threatening the Jews based on their ethnicity or religion. I mean, they literally try to have it deemed a terrorist organization, which is just incredibly ironic. The only evidence adduced by the lobby is declarations of support that Saimadoun has made for Palestinian armed resistance. I do believe specifically the PLF, right? The UN General Assembly has recognized repeatedly that people living under an apartheid system and military occupation have a right to resistance, including armed struggle. We've talked about that before. Upholding that right shouldn't be a controversial matter in Brussels, a city which was placed under military occupation by Germany 85 years ago. In many parts of the city, it is impossible to go for a short stroll without encountering plaques honoring the Nazis' victims. The arrest of Mahmoud Khatib illustrates that these plaques and the messages they convey are being ignored. The Belgian authorities are not siding with Palestinians going through a 21st century Holocaust in Gaza and their supporters around the world. They are siding with Israel, the state carrying out that Holocaust, and its network of lobbies. So, who's next? If the Belgian authorities enjoy any success in muzzling Mahmoud Khatib and Saima Doon, then we have to ask, who is next? All Palestine solidarity campaigners are at risk, and Palestine isn't some kind of hermetically sealed issue. The struggle for justice and equality between the River Jordan and the sea cannot be separated from other struggles against oppression, impoverishment, and environmental degradation. In Brussels, protests in support of Palestinian rights have been diverse. Like in many other cities, they have brought together Muslims, Jews, Christians, non-believers, trade unionists, feminists, and LGBTQ activists. If the authorities ramp up the repression of activists for Palestinian rights, then the question must be asked, who's next? Belgium's latest government is nicknamed Arizona, as the colors of the parties in the ruling coalition resemble that state's flag. The connections are emblematic in another way. Arizona is now synonymous with border militarization. Brussels hosts institutions which have made the militarization of the EU's borders a priority to which the political mainstream is now fully committed. Israeli weapons and surveillance technology tested on Palestinians is being used in militarization processes both in Europe and along the U.S.-Mexico border. While Frontex, the EU's border guard agency, is based in Warsaw, the policies it implements are made in Brussels. The agency's real value will be underscored next week, when it will be the most visible EU body at a weapons industry conference in Copenhagen. One of the weapons Frontex uses to track refugees is an Israeli drone. This is an example of Israeli versatility. Tools of occupation and even genocide can be adapted for various purposes. Mahmoud Khatib has every right to live and be politically active in Belgium. The way he has been arrested this week shows how little basic rights are being discarded. It would be nice if Europeans could simply go for a beer or an ice cream and celebrate that we are better than America. The truth is that any such complacency would be foolish. The detention of Mahmoud Khalil, a U.S. green card holder, over his role in New York protests is frightening. Nothing quite as extreme has happened in Europe so far this year. Repression is nonetheless rife. In Germany, citizens of other European countries now face deportation for defending Palestinian rights. Germany regards standing by Israel at all times as a Staatsräson, a reason of state. And God help anyone who thinks otherwise. Germany's Ursula von der Leyen is the EU's most powerful politician, vow genocide, as Claire Daly would call her, or at least is behaving as such. Despite her dispute with Trump over tariffs, which is bullshit, her agenda bears strong similarities to that of the U.S. president. Trump and his team are gleefully kicking people out of the U.S., sending them to concentration camps in El Salvador. Von der Leyen and her team are determined to kick as many people out of the EU as they can get away with. The list of countries they have deemed as safe for expulsions include Egypt, Morocco, India, and Tunisia. So, in case you needed to write those down. None of these countries can seriously be considered safe for people who challenge their governments. Few places are safe now, and when cops feel they can simply grab people on the streets of Brussels, Europe is anything but safe. Thoughts so far before we head to our next one?
I mean, just the same shit that's happening over here, really. So, I mean, I think it just kind of shows the hold the Israeli lobby have on our politicians everywhere. It's not just exclusive to the US. Like, and even this is happening in Belgium, which you would think is, I wouldn't say liberal, but I think generally a lot of people think that Europe is slightly more liberal, depending on the country, than
which it can
the US
be.
is. Which
Just
it can be
depends on the issue.
Well, in this issue, you know, we can tell it's definitely like the farthest of, not the farthest of the right wing, but definitely more right in terms of dealing with any dissent for Palestine, which I think is kind of interesting. It just seems to me like the more that people, the world order is trying to crack down on people to maintain, the status with Israel, the more people I think are just over it and just really more willing to dissent. So I think if anything is having more of an opposite effect, instead of trying to have people win to their side in terms of being more pro-Israel, I think is making the case for people to actually kind of look into Israel a lot more and kind of seeing a lot of their colonialist and imperialist practices that they've been implementing since really the turn of the century. So, but yeah, I think it just proves that no one is safe, especially when it comes to the Israeli lobby, and any dissent in terms of you showing any support for Palestine can get you arrested.
Yep. Which is just nuts to me. I mean, they're doing that weird shit across the board. So, but that article mentioned Germany, right? So we'll head over there. No, but specifically, he also at the end mentioned Germany. So we have Alan MacLeod writing in Mint Press about Germany specifically, and the case of Hüseyin Dagru, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who's facing prison time in Germany for criticizing Israeli journalists, which, is there such a thing, or are they just propagandists? Find out at 11. So, amid a crackdown on pro-Palestinian voices in Germany, a journalist regularly attacked as a Russian operative is facing up to 3 years in prison for defamation of Israeli-backed journalists. Hüseyin Dagru, founder of Red Media, has been charged with defamation for actions relating to a spat with Nicholas Potter, a German state-funded reporter working for the Israeli outlet, the Jerusalem Post. In December, Potter, self-styled counter-extremist expert, published a lengthy expose in the Jerusalem Post claiming that Red Media, Mint Press News, and the Grey Zone were part of a network of far-left outlets promoting extremism and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Worse still, he strongly insinuated that all three were promoted and funded by the governments of Russia, Syria, and Iran. These charges are false, see Mint Press's rebuttal, and are particularly ironic, coming as they do from a journalist who is funded by the German Foreign Office, one who, amid a genocide, moved to Israel to work for an outlet headed by a former IDF spokesperson. Moreover, Potter himself arguably holds extreme views on the subject. Just weeks after attacking us for our journalism, he penned an article titled, "Can Journalists Be Terrorists?", which attempted to justify many of Israel's killing of Palestinian media workers. Both Red and Mint Press immediately highlighted much of this important context, and our content went viral. A sticker about Potter based on Red Media graphic was spotted in Berlin. The sticker took the outlet's criticism of him and plastered the phrase, the German Hurensohn, the German son of a bitch. Over the top, that sticker is a centerpiece of the prosecution's allegation of a coordinated hate campaign against Potter, led by Red Media. Potter claims that he has suffered harassment and threats to his life, and some have tried to link this back to Red Media's graphic. So, there's that graphic, right? German journalist as good as genocide propaganda, so good at genocide propaganda, hired in Israel. That's the sticker, right? So, well, that's the graphic. They then made it a sticker and put it up places. So, I think that might not be a good idea to do that if we're worried about, you shouldn't put stickers up like that if that's the issue. But the accusations provoked a storm of articles in German media, all supportive of Potter. Many echoed U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's claims that Red Media is a Russian government-controlled influence operation. Dagru denies these allegations, although he was previously a key part of Redfish, a platform financed by Reply, a German-based outlet partially funded by the Russian state-controlled network RT. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Dagru closed Redfish, and started his own independent outlet. He insists it has no connection to Russia and is dedicated to making revolutionary and educational content. He also denies having any information or involvement in producing anti-Potter stickers. Potter's support for Israeli policies has certainly drawn the ire of many in the pro-Palestine movement in Germany, yet he is far from alone. The German government has offered its full support to Israel, gone so far as to ban pro-Palestine demonstrations and lock up countless activists, including Jewish people. The phrase "from the river to the sea" has effectively been criminalized, with Berlin announcing that it would deny citizenship to anyone using it. New German citizenship laws require all applicants to sign what is, in effect, a loyalty oath to the State of Israel, declaring that it has a right to exist. Berlin is currently deporting foreign residents for their participation in lawful protests supporting Palestinian rights. Dogru's legal team had advised him that his wife and son could be deported as well. Sound familiar? Commentators have warned that with these actions, Germany is lurching towards the authoritarian right, with the far-right AfD party surging in the polls. A recent survey found they are now the most popular party in Germany. Many inside the country are ringing the alarm bells. For decades, Germany has stuck with Israel and its narratives in the Middle East. Dogru told Mint Press, adding, "Since October 7th, we see that the German government is violently repressing activists to make sure there are no voices in Germany critical of Israel. Activists have paid a high price to make sure they can protest." According to Dogru, this is a test case. Ultimately, the suppression of speech is not about Israel, but an attack on its own society. Germany, in preparing to assert itself as a leading military and political force in NATO and the EU, to do that, it must eliminate resistance, not just abroad, but at home. This isn't driven by historical guilt or solidarity, it's about silencing dissent and disciplining society. By targeting the most marginalized, the German state is disciplining its population, silencing oppression before it grows. The message from the German government is clear, Dogru claims: fall in line or be crushed. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Well, as I said, I think it's having the opposite effect of what they want. Like it's forcing people to kind of realize the stronghold that Israel has on the West, and I think, and in a lot of ways, it's affecting. The idea of Jewish people not being safe. In this case, yes, I agree, because, and I don't want to sound, and it's not fair in this regard, but yeah, people are going to associate what Israel is doing to what Jewish people are doing, which the two, you can't mesh the two, but at the same time, other than like, obviously, if you're anti-Zionist, and that's really more the issue that I think we're not discussing too much, is the idea, it's not so much the faith in of itself, it's Zionism, which is not a faith. Let's make that clear. Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism. You can be Jew and not, and Indy, who we love dearly, is one. That's clearly separate from the religion of it in of itself. Like, and I just kind of, and I think we have to be careful in making that distinction, because I think people are kind of summing up, which I think in a lot of ways is adding to more the victimization of Jewish people might feel, and being like, oh, like these people don't like me because I'm Jewish. No, it's the idea of what you seemingly represent in terms of Zionism. That's what people don't like about you, or the idea of you thinking like, out of your suffering, that it's okay for you to colonize and terrorize another people group for the sake of land for you, in the matter of you feeling safe. Whereas in the West, I feel like you're Jewish, no offense to anyone, but you're probably among the safest people in the world at this point, for sure.
All right, this isn't earth-shattering news, but AOC and Bernie have been caught flying around on private jets on Earth Day to fight the oligarchy. So, okay, AOC, Bernie, they're on their little plane saying we got to fight the oligarchy. Is this earth-shattering news? No. It's funny to laugh at, because sometimes you gotta laugh at these hypocrites, you know, just like that, just like some of these evangelical preachers who go on private planes, their little PJs, their private jets, you know, because, oh no, they don't want to be with the masses, you know, because here's the thing, maybe this is me, okay, but if I was like a big time preacher or something of that nature, you know, I'd be like, yes, we must be among the people, because I didn't see. Yeah, I've never heard the story of Jesus Christ, like, you know, saying, put me in a cart. I don't want to be with the people. No, he walked he walked in the alleys. He walked in the streets, you know, as the story goes, going to everyone, the sick, the disabled, the poor, the lowest of us. He went to them all. And that's what you should do, you know? Not take a private jet. And same thing goes for these politicians, you know, private jets. Now I get it. Maybe there's security. Okay, whatever. But it's just one of these moments where we can just laugh at the hypocrites, you know, because remember, AOC and Bernie are saying that Trump is bad for climate. Hey, was that AOC? Is that Baby Bear? Baby Bear! Baby Bear! There it is, the private jet. Bernie! Bernie! What are you doing? That doesn't stop climate change. What would happen if Trump found out about this? It's Bernie and AOC. There they are. Oh my God. Tiberius Monk, Captain Planet is not pleased to see this. Also, Tiberius Monk, listen, buddy, my friend of the show. I you know what? Just a little bit off. This is not related to the segment, but I gotta do a watch party for Succession now, because I'm starting to rewatch season 1, and that infamous showdown with Gil, the quasi Bernie Sanders character in that show. Oh, it's pure gold. And, you know, don't get me wrong, Logan Roy is a scumbag, but you know what? He's my scumbag. Don't get burnt again. That's what Peace Stuff says. Don't get burnt again. Don't get burnt again. So what went down? What went down? So on Earth Day 2025, a moment intended to highlight the urgency of climate action. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is facing fierce backlash after being caught boarding a luxury private jet. Who paid for that? Who? A bird goes tweet and an owl goes who? The timing could not have been more explosive. Just as climate-conscious voters marked April 22nd with the calls to curb emissions, AOC, a self-described environmental warrior, was photographed stepping out aboard a carbon-spewing Bombardier Challenge jet on her Fight the Oligarchy tour with Senator Bernie Sanders. According to Fox News report published on April 21st, the progressive duo used the jet to leapfrog across western states, hitting cities like Salt Lake City, Bakersfield, Sacramento in under a week. Oh my goodness. The estimated cost over $77,000 for roughly 5 hours of flight time. That bill is allegedly being footed in part by taxpayer dollars and political committee funds, an irony not lost on their critics. AOC, who has long positioned herself as a leading figure in climate justice movement, previously condemned the use of private jets in no uncertain terms. In 2023, she took to social media to slam corporate executives, asking, for real, how many private jets do these CEOs need? It is insatiable. It is unacceptable. Well, I don't know. I mean, look, you're using one too, AOC. Come on. But critics say the Congresswoman is now living out the very behavior she once scorned. Private jets emit an estimated 10 to 20 times more CO2 per passenger than, oh my goodness, than commercial flights, according to data from the European Federation of Transport and Environment. In one 5-hour private flight, Bombardier Challenge can produce over 25 metric tons of CO2, the equivalent of what the average American emits in an entire year. The blatant contradiction is fueling accusations of hypocrisy from both sides of the political aisle. The National Republican Congressional Committee quickly labeled AOC and Sanders as champagne socialists, just like Hassan, mocking their calls to rein in corporate greed while flying in what amounts to a luxury airborne boardroom. So who paid for the flights? Financial records reveal that Sanders' campaign's armed friends of Bernie Sanders spent over $221,000 on private jet travel in the first quarter of 2025 alone. Listen, before anyone starts wagging fingers, you have Democrat and Republican politicians doing the same thing, spending far much more. Not defending Bernie or AOC, but just throwing it out there. While the campaign finance disclosures for AOC's trip on the jet have not been released, her participation on the same aircraft raises serious questions about whether taxpayer money or political donations intended for grassroots outreach were used to fund the high-flying luxury trip. It's a double standard. It's a double standard on Earth Day. What would Captain Planet say? What would he say right now? If I was Captain Planet, I would look sad. I would, you know what? It's not good. It's hilarious to watch, but believe you me, it's not good. Not good at all. But there you go.
It's really difficult for a candidate to come in who is saddled with the policies that are on.
But let's say,
oh boy,
let's say, just throwing out a
look
wild
at you trying to preserve the relationship all of a sudden.
A wild hypothetical. Let's say the candidate wasn't part of the government. Let's say the candidate did have a lot of economic experience. Let's say the candidate did deal with crises. Let's say the candidate had a plan to deal with the challenges in the here and now.
You sneaky. You're running as an outsider.
I am an outsider.
Wow.
Wow, indeed, Mr. Jon Stewart, if that is your real name. Oh, wait, that isn't your real name. Anyway, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com. Welcome back to another edition of the Corbett Report podcast. Of course, I am your host, James Corbett, coming to you, as always, from the sunny climes of Western Japan here in late April of 2025 with episode 475 of the Corbett Report podcast. Meet Mark Carney, globalist insider. Because, yes, if you are paying attention, although the current unselected Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, likes to portray himself as a political outsider who has never held office. Therefore, he's trustworthy, guys. I think, as I hope my audience knows by now, Mark Carney is no outsider to the real systems of power that govern over us, not these political parties that are put out as the birdcage liner in the globalist system, but the actual institutions of power. But today in the podcast, I'm going to elaborate on that and show you precisely why Mark Carney is not what Canada needs. And if you are watching this podcast at the time of its release here in late April of 2025, well, this will be particularly timely because, as you may or may not know, Canada is going to the polls on April 28th to have a selection. Yay! And that selection will decide whether or not Mark Carney and the Liberal Party of Canada get to maintain their control of Parliament or whether they will be kicked out in favor of another one of the selected candidates, probably Pierre Poilievre. But if you are watching this here in late April of 2025, you may be gobsmacked, like many others, including myself, to see the drastic, incredible change in fortunes that the Liberal Party of Canada has undergone in the past few months, because, in case you didn't know, Trudeau and the Liberals were almost universally reviled and vilified by, say, the end of 2024. Everyone in Canada pretty much had enough of Liberal Party rule under Pierre Trudeau's son, Justin Castro. But amazingly enough, here we are in April of 2025, and according to the latest polls, the Liberals are actually ahead in this selection circus cycle. So it looks like the Liberal Party of Canada, now led by unselected Prime Minister Mark Carney, may actually maintain their position of power in the Parliament. That is a remarkable, drastic change of events in a few months. And what happened in those few months in order to bring about that radical change in Canadian public opinion? Well, we'll get more into that in today's episode. But I think today, let's familiarize ourselves with the current and presumably soon-to-be future Prime Minister of Canada, his real background, what he really represents, because he is not an outsider, as he likes to portray himself, but a consummate insider. And just for the record, I of course should state, take these CBC polls of the the selection cycle for what they're worth. And if people want more on my take on polls and how they are used to manipulate the minds of the public, you can see my previous Propaganda Watch episode on polls show people aren't buying establishment BS. Propaganda Watch. I hope you will watch or refamiliarize yourself with that, because it's an important piece of the propaganda puzzle. But moving right along, where do we begin if we want to know more about who Mark Carney really is, what he really believes, what he really stands for? Well, let's start with the bare basics. Let's find out what the bastion of truthiness itself, Wikipedia, can tell us about Mr. Mark Carney. Well, we can learn some basic facts about his biography. For example, Mark Joseph Carney is the 24th Prime Minister of Canada, and he was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. And for a Calgarian like myself, that's already a red flag. But more seriously, he graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from Harvard University in 1988, then studied at the University of Oxford, where he earned a master's degree in 93 and a doctorate in 95, which all sounds very impressive to the average Joe Schmo on the street, but hopefully, again, is setting off some alarm bells for people who know the types of people that come out of institutions like Harvard or the University of Oxford and its interesting connections and associations. Anyway, he went on from that directly into another organization that I'm sure my listeners will be familiar with. He held various roles at Goldman Sachs before joining the Bank of Canada as a deputy governor in 2003. So think of that. Less than a decade out of college, already having served various roles at Goldman Sachs, and suddenly the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada. That's a pretty meteoric rise, isn't it? In 2004, he's named as Senior Associate Deputy Minister for the Department of Finance. In 2007, he was named Governor of the Bank of Canada, where he was installed just in time to preside over the Canadian government's response to the 2008 financial crisis. And as we all know, as has become economic lore of the past decade and a half, Canada survived the financial crisis fairly well. Canadian banks and institutions actually did all right during the crisis. So it must have been that amazing leadership of Mark Carney, or so he wants us to believe. Then he led the Canadian Central Bank unit until 2013, when he was appointed as the Governor of the Bank of England, where he led the British Central Bank's response to Brexit and the early phase of the COVID-19 scamdemic. From there, he served as chair and head of impact investing at Brookfield Asset Management and as chair of the board of directors of Bloomberg LP. He was also appointed the United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. And he also worked as one of many informal advisors to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as it says here, during the COVID-19 scamdemic, although there may be more to that story, and was made chair of the Liberal Party's Economic Growth Task Force in September 2024, blah, blah, blah. As partial as this biography is, and as much as it leaves out about other important institutions and bodies that Carney has presided over and or served on in the intervening decades, this still, I think, gives you at least a sense that this is no outsider to the real system of control, economic, financial, and otherwise, that is governing over the planet, not the Canadian government or parliament itself, or not one of those lowly member of parliament selected positions. No, this man has been in real positions to do real economic damage or prosperity. Bring prosperity to all. And so it is in that context that we have to evaluate Mark Carney and his record. So let's start today by taking it from the horse's mouth, because why not give the devil his due and see what he has to say for himself? And in order to do that, we're going to go to the website of the TFM report. You may or may not remember that Chris and Jody had me on as a guest on the TFM report in the past. If not, I'll link it up here so you can go and watch that interview. But they have covered Carney and his connections and what he has written in the past. Specifically, if you go to the research packs part of their website, you can find, well, a number of different reports and things that are worth your time and attention that are here for download, including Mark Carney Values. And if you click on that, you will get a PDF of this book called Values, Building a Better World for All, published by Penguin Random House Canada in 2021 and penned by none other than Mark Carney. And yes, Mr. Carney wrote an entire book about the concept of value and values and what that means in our present world, and, well, ultimately what it means for any would-be future leader of Canada, let alone any other nation. And, well, I won't presume to summarize the book myself. Why don't we let Mark Carney do it himself, in his own voice, from his own audiobook reading of Values.
An overarching theme that runs through this book is that we cannot take the market system, which produces such plenty and so many solutions, for granted. Markets are essential to progress, to finding solutions to our most pressing problems, but they don't exist in a vacuum. Markets are social constructs, whose effectiveness is determined partly by the rules of the state and partly by the values of society. If left unattended, they will corrode those values. We must concentrate on rebuilding social capital to make markets work. To do so, individuals and their firms must rediscover their sense of solidarity and responsibility for the system. More broadly, by rebasing valuation on society's values, we can create platforms of prosperity.
By rebasing valuation on society's values, we can create platforms of prosperity. Rebasing valuation on reevaluation of all values. Why is that ringing a bell? Well, yes, as the philosophically literate and informed in the audience might recognize, that is a specific philosophical idea with some controversial and potentially provocative roots. I'll leave a hint in the show notes here for today's episode in case you were interested in pursuing that and following up on that. But anyway, an intriguing concept, but I think we get the idea of what he is floating in this book. Essentially that, yes, value, of course, has an economic meaning that's derived from market value, but we have societal values, and we have to reorient our society towards societal values, not simply market values. And one can imagine the types of things that flow from this in both the exoteric as well as the esoteric sense. And again, we get hints of that from within the text itself, just this small passage that we were hearing from. We must concentrate on rebuilding social capital to make markets worse. To do so, individuals and their firms must rediscover their sense of solidarity and responsibility for the system. Indeed, again, I think you get the sense of where this is going. But if it is true that value is in the eye of the beholder, then the question is, what kind of beholder is Mark Carney? And again, I'm going to let him speak for himself in this passage from the very end of the book.
We have a choice. We can continue to let financial valuation narrow our values, or we can create an ecosystem in which society's values broaden the market's conception of value. In this way, individual creativity and market dynamism will be channeled to achieve society's highest goals.
Now, I trust that my experienced, informed, literate audience can see through the high-minded, highfalutin globaloni of Mark Carney to the real core of what he is saying underneath that highfalutin language and the nice mealy-mouthed platitudes that politicians and those of their ilk like to spout at the public. But just to make sure everyone is on the same page, let's go through this and go through the types of ideas that he is wrestling with in his book Values, let alone the types of ideas that he has talked about in his many, many interviews and public appearances, because once you do so, I think you will discover that Mark Carney, is devoted to, for example, the absolute existential threat of annihilation of the human species that is the climate crisis, which, of course, in his valuation, is the carte blanche for governments to rule by crisis, to use emergency measures and to do anything it takes in order to combat this crisis. But not just governments, of course, as is a key part of the things that he's arguing there, for example, in Values, is that companies and individuals have to take on their own responsibilities for this crisis and have to exert pressure upwards. Not only the government coming down, but people have to exert pressure on their bosses and their companies. Hey, what's your net zero plan, Mr. CEO? And if you don't have one, we're going to publicly shame you, etc., etc. So there's that aspect to what is being talked about by Carney here. There's also the fascism, in the real, true, literal textbook definition sense of that word, of the melding of private and public structures of governance into that fascist confluence, which is these days covered over with the nice-sounding mealy-mouthed platitude of public-private cooperation. Or, as Carney talks about and writes about specifically in Values, once again, the entire book is there up on the TFM report, so you can go read it for yourself, and don't take my or anyone else's word for it. See what he wrote for himself, but you will see that he talks about, for example, stakeholder capitalism. Where have I heard that term before? Who is the one who's been trying to bring that into public discourse for the past several decades? Oh, right, Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, birds of a feather. And you'll see, of course, Carney talking about things like social capital, which ultimately leads to such things as social credit. Who gets to evaluate and value your social capital? Well, the government will when it starts to implement its TRICOM-like series of controls over the population in the name of saving us from the climate crisis, of course. And of course, all of this is guided by the same technocratic vision of society, which Carney knows a thing or two about, being in a position of technocratic control over the economies of Canada and England and now the world, because of the UN Special Envoy on Climate Finance position that he's held, let alone the Bank for International Settlements and other posts that he's held, more on which later. So I think those are the types of things that are really underlying the language that is being used to obfuscate and sound nice, sound like the kind of things that Canadians and those around the world would love to embrace. Yes, here's someone who cares about the people and the planet and wants to save us and bring us together under this private-public cooperation, stakeholder capitalism for environmental sustainable development goals, etc. Anyway, we do not have to speculate on these aspects of what this globaloni actually means in plain English, because he's said it for himself. For example, just as one example on the recent campaign trail, ReclaimTheNet.org notes that, for example, in Canada, Mark Carney vows internet speech crackdown if elected, citing online pollution of misogyny conspiracies. So this is in reference to just a routine run-of-the-mill campaign stop that he made recently in Ontario, where he was asked some uncomfortable questions and managed to deflect by talking about, there are many serious issues that we're dealing with, ignoring the criticism that has just been lobbed his way. One of them is the sea of misogyny, anti-Semitism, hatred, and conspiracy theories. This sort of pollution online that washes over our virtual borders from the United States. Because we all know all of this flows from the US anyway, right? And yes, surprise, surprise, exactly as Trudeau did during For example, when people were criticizing him for his handling of the scamdemic and the crackdown on protests, etc., it was the misogynist, anti-Semitic, hate-spewing, U.S.-funded seditionists that were behind the protests, the trucker convoy, etc. As Trudeau said, winning fake news story of the year for 2022, was it? As you may or may not recall. However, here it is coming from Carney's mouth, because Carney, as we shall see in this exploration today, is nothing more than a more savvy, more competent, more informed, more ideologically devoted Justin Trudeau. Trudeau was, as I have said before, and I will say again, nothing more than a drama teacher who took the part of Prime Minister and played it well for his puppet string pullers. But amongst those people pulling on his strings was Mark Carney. Again, a point that we'll see later in greater detail later in today's episode. But not to say that, of course, Carney does not have his own string pullers. Of course he does. But he is higher up on the global chain than someone like Trudeau. And here he is saying the exact same things that Canadians reviled Trudeau for. Here they're coming from Carney. But for some reason, a lot of Canadians seem to be lapping it up. Or at least the CBC wants you to believe that. Anyway, this article goes on to talk about some of the online hate speech laws and other forms of Orwellian internet censorship crackdown that the Liberal Party under Trudeau has tried and failed to pass in recent years, Bill C-36, Bill C-63, and then goes on to note that Carney's little impromptu speech here on his routine campaign stop didn't include specifics about how he was going to crack down, but this is usually code for, we'll make it up later. But the intent is clear. The Liberals are once again oiling up the guillotine of speech regulation, ready to let it fall on anything remotely edgy, impolite, or, God forbid, unpopular. And of course, it's only the Liberals who do this, right? The Conservatives, if they get in power, will only limit the free speech of, say, people who want to protest what's happening in Palestine. But that's the good kind of censorship, right, Conservatives? Anyway, this is the type of thing that Carney is devoted to. These are the types of values that he values and that he will make very clear in his years in power if he should be selected. But again, let's not put words in his mouth. Let's take them from his own mouth. And we'll look at specifically what Carney said during the Freedom Convoy there in Canada a few years ago. Again, my listeners should be well aware and familiar with that story and the incredible, absolutely nightmare dystopic crackdown on protest that happened in Canada. The criminalization of dissent that I have documented on this podcast before. Please check the links in the show notes if you need to refamiliarize yourself with that subject matter. But what was Carney's role during that time? Because as we know, he was a total political outsider, not holding any political office at the time. So he must have just been off in England doing his Bank of England thing and not worrying at all what was going on in Canada, right? Wrong, of course. He did have things to say and, in fact, was whispering in the ear of Prime Minister Puppet-in-Chief Trudeau at that time. But let's take this from the aforementioned TFM report, in which Chris and Jody, on a not so recent, last year edition of their TFM report, were going through Carney's public statements and pronouncements and dissected a little editorial that he wrote about the seditionists in Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy.
Now, let's take a look at some highlights from AM Wake Up from this week. Make sure to support and share their show to keep this great channel going. Share the show. Share the show. Share the show.
Share the fucking show.
Yeah, no, great timing on the show. I really appreciate you sacrificing the Pope for me so we can have something interesting to talk about today.
We do what we
really,
can.
you do a lot of research, like, in preparation for these things, man. Amazing.
We do what we can. We lit the black candles on 4/19.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds like hocus pocus. Are you going to bring back the Sanderson sisters? Are you a virgin? Did you light the black flame candle? Is that what's going on here?
Well, my girlfriend's Mexican and she's into some weird religious shit. So
I see.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, hey, it's a pleasure to meet both of you guys, and I just want to say just to thank you for sharing my stuff, and people tell me all the time that they heard my song from you. So that's just amazing. So folks like you keep it alive. So truth and power through music, as far as I'm concerned. But holy cow, do we have a lot of I want to talk about a lot, especially when I woke up in the news this morning. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, well, hey man, you're the guest. You lead the conversation. We
Well, you were just
improv.
talking about symbols and how they do symbols and COVID and all this stuff is symbols. And with COVID, it was 33 for me. That's like one of the things that they they use that number for a lot of different reasons. And let me just back up and say, hi, I'm Foundering and I play music. I play ragtime piano. That's like my main shtick, but I'm also kind of a patterns guy, right? So the thing with these ragtime styles, it's just a lot of notes, a lot of black notes on the page, right? It's a sea of notes, and you have to sort of sift through and pick the right notes, right? The right patterns. It's not like classical music where, you're memorizing each page and measure and it's in your head, and then you've got it. That's a whole different approach to music. With the style that I play, it's just a constant sea of information, and you have to sift through and toss out the stuff that isn't good, if that makes sense, right? And it's like an approximation. So I also play Scrabble professionally, right? So I'm studying word lists every day. I'm studying anagrams. I know that sounds ridiculously dorky, but it keeps me fresh, and it keeps me when I see patterns, I notice them. It's like there's that fine line between schizophrenia and just a really solid pattern recognition, right? And we all have to walk that line, right? Like that is our challenge in life, is can we make that balance, right? We are the funambulists, right? The tightrope walkers of the clown world, right? We're the tightrope walkers in clown world, right? It's our job.
All right.
So, I taken a lot of this information, and I'm pretty good at picking at what I see and I can discern, right? So when COVID hit, all of a sudden they started doing 33 in all these headlines. It was like 33 have now in Italy, 33 have in Spain. The Chinese victim is 33 years old. And I started seeing 33. And I already knew that COVID was fake, but at this point, this was like around February, March 2020, when they really started going hard on just the ritual aspect of the event. And I was just seeing the 33s everywhere. And I was like, guys, this is an occult ritual here. And the 33 is basically the calling card. It's how they communicate with each other. It's not really meant for the masses. It's meant for those who are in tune with the program, and that they can all see, oh, okay, the messaging is really hard on these certain numbers, and this is clearly an occult ritual, right? So a lot of people, they shut down when they hear the word occult or esoteric or things like that, and these are just fancy terms for hidden, right? So what is happening that is hidden behind the scenes, and they recycle a lot of dates and numbers for these rituals. And part of it is just because they're weird, they're sick people, but it's also just a part of the effectiveness of these events, is they kind of have to broadcast what they're doing. It's almost like a karmic thing that they kind of have to tell us. So I'd love to sort of go into what I think about this Pope thing, and also just some of the history of occult rituals, because we are right now in the occult season of sacrifice by fire. So is this all resonating with you guys? Like, does this
and it kicked off the 19th, and the 19th there were a couple of like large fires. There was just a fire at Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's house. There was both the whole
wasn't that blamed on like an anti-Semite or something ridiculous?
It was. It was. It sure was something to do with Israel, of course.
Shapiro. So what else is it going to be?
Well, so I was going to mention that it doesn't always have to be an overt fire sacrifice. Like
they did try to kick off a race war too.
Sure, there's another thing. But last year we actually did, on April 19th, Max Azzarello, I believe his name was the gentleman who set himself on fire. He self-immolated, was in front of the Capitol or somewhere, right? And he supposedly wrote a manifesto against the Illuminati or against the New World Order, but he basically chose the Illuminati's favorite fire sacrifice day, literally April 19th, to set himself on fire in a big ritual. I mean, if you want to like protest the New World Order, that's the opposite. I mean, that just the whole thing was ridiculous. And then people did some research and found connections with Peter Thiel with him and this other sketchy stuff. And I doubt that these things are even real and as they appear. But so for a sacrifice, it doesn't necessarily have to be an overt fire ritual like that was last year. And I believe on April 19th this year, we had 2 news things that broke around the 19th, but maybe was the 19th. Israel was going to not do the ceasefire, and Ukraine also. Zelensky came out and said he was not going to do so. We had 2 and the major events that we have, both of them were like, you know what, we're going to keep killing. And that was announced on April 19th. So it doesn't get as blatant as that. And then with the Pope, it's just the icing as far as I'm concerned.
You remember or not, but Aaron Schwartz's official day of death, because I don't believe it was suicide, was January 11th.
January 11th, that's right.
Yeah.
And I posted my my Reddit documentary on Twitter on January 11th, 2022, 11 years after his death. I like to do that too. I take I'll make documentaries and make them 33 minutes and 33 seconds long. And people are like, oh, you're Illuminati. I'm like, no. It's a joke. I'm like laughing at them. I'm taking their numbers and symbols and then throwing them back.
You're taking the word back.
That's right. I'm taking them back, right, for the people. So yeah, Schwartz was sacrificed for sure. But I was spending a lot of time on Reddit in the 2010s, and I noticed around 2017, 18, every day on the front page, vaccine propaganda, pro-vaccine propaganda, hard. And it was right when people were going TDS crazy, doing the pussy hat marches and all that nuts, right? Trump had triggered this constant state of stress, distress, this mass formation psychosis that we saw them dial up to 11 during COVID. Well, it started not completely, but the war on terror was a part of that too. But when Trump came and when you had social media, this new juggernaut, this new type of thing, propaganda, and then the Smith modernization shit that Obama did, it was this perfect storm of propagandizing the masses. And I noticed every day propaganda, vaccine propaganda. And normally there's rules on these sites where you can't call for violence. Right? It makes sense. You can't call for death of anybody, right? They started officially allowing it against Trump and against anti-vaxxers, where you could actually call for the death of someone if you said that they were an anti-vaxxer, and Reddit and all these social media companies were allowing it. I'm like, wait a second. Like, you are censoring us for just like talking about conspiracies, but I can actually call for people's deaths, and you're
Jimmy Kimmel can do it.
That's right. Exactly. Right. So I noticed this happening. And then 2019, it was at a fever pitch. And right then they removed the Brady Bunch episode from all streaming services. And what am I talking about? There's an episode in the very first season of the Brady Bunch, aired in 1969. Again, right during the propaganda. I mean, we were being propagandized about the moon landing and all that shit right then, right? But TV was still hadn't been fully taken over, the entertainment industry. And the whole crux of the show, I posted it. I found a link of it because it's really hard to find these days. I posted it on X, Twitter. Anyway, essentially, the kids all get measles and they all have a rocking good time because they get to miss school. They get to hang out at home. They're laughing about it. They got smiles. There's a quote like, "Oh, I got the measles and a great big smile." Like, the whole thing was like, this was not some scary, deadly thing. And the vaccine was released that decade, but it was not widely adopted or even widely discussed really until the 80s when they did the vaccine act, whatever it did. It gave immunity to the vaccine companies. It was the Childhood Vaccine Act. I want to say 1986, which is right after I was born. So we didn't really get a lot of these vaccines, but everyone else did. And my dad is a doctor, and through the 90s, he would bring back vaccines and just jab us up at home. And I think we were all severely vaccine injured as a result. I lost my vision after a vaccine, as in I'm almost legally blind, essentially. And I had this really bad reaction. Of course, I didn't understand what it was at the time, but now I know that that's what happened to me. So basically from the 90s on, we have been all poisoned with all these vaccines. I'm convinced that none of them are good. And my own kid has had 0. She's doing great. But this whole, I know, and I try, it's tough because then people are like, oh, you're anti-vaxxer. Oh, you are a flat earther. They got us all into this. Oh, you deny viruses exist. And I'm like, look, can we just have these conversations with a little bit of nuance instead of pigeonholing us into these extremes? And I'm like, I want to talk about the space fuckery without me having to say it's all fake and gay. And maybe it is all fake and gay, but like people are so afraid. And maybe it is like the artist personalities that we're more open and receptive to questioning things, because we're constantly recreating our own selves. Every time we create, it's our new notion of who we are, right? And so I can admit that I was wrong. Like I researched vaccines for years, and I thought that I had a really good notion of the history of viruses and polio and what measles and what all these were. And now I'm like, 10 years of research, I think I was just wrong about it all. And I'm like, I'm okay to be wrong about it all, right? So to 2019 is we saw this huge shift, and it was just propaganda, vaccines. And then they removed the Brady Bunch. And I'm like, guys, I think they're going to do some sort of pandemic ritual, guys. And December 2019 happens, and all these bodies start falling in China. And there's all these clips. I don't know if you remember these clips, and there are these bodies, and there's people in there they're falling over, and everyone's freaking out. And it was on the conspiracy places, forums, that people were freaking out. And I'm like, wait, no, guys. No. This isn't real. No, this is part of the staged production, right? That we are going to be. And I noticed, particularly on Reddit, that the accounts that were pushing the COVID fear were similar to the ones that were pushing pro-vaccine propaganda, right? Okay. And a lot of them were similar to ones that were pushing pro-Israel propaganda. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But they were all part of the same narrative network of shills, essentially paid shills. And that was the tell for me. So by December 2019, I knew that COVID, or it wasn't called COVID, it was just coronavirus. I knew that was going to be the next big thing. So the next month in January, I made probably my most important warning that I've ever given. I warned loudly online that corona was fake, and that there was going to be 2 narratives set up around it. One would be this, wet market came from bat soup, and that would be for the normies. And the other was going to be, there was a lab leak. And of course, everyone was being censored for saying that. But that was part of the scam, in that it made then the conspiracy theorists, who normally would be open to questioning things, they're like, we can't say it's a lab leak. Therefore it's a lab leak. And look, I'm not saying that they're not doing ridiculously dangerous gain of function shit, and that Fauci and them all, and Ralph Barrick and Wuhan, and then was it Fort Detrick and all this shit that they're pulling all this stuff. And was that the island, where Lyme disease came from, right? They're messing with all these
Montauk.
All that shit, right? Like they're definitely doing all this stuff, and 100%. But what they're not doing is releasing a virus and then that's causing a global pandemic and killing millions of people. That's never what's happening. Is it maybe possible? I don't know, but that's certainly not what happened with COVID. So I immediately tried to show people, and then when the 33 started coming out, I'm like, guys, it's 33, it's 33. This is a ritual. It's a ritual. And then to sort of catch you up with my life story, everything obviously shut down where I was I'm in California, right?
Yeah.
And I had a YouTube channel for 15 years, and mostly it was just for normie stuff. Like I play ragtime. I'm a ragtime piano guy, so mostly it's just ragtime piano stuff, right? And but at that point, I'm like, look, I have to then just go hard. We're being censored talking about any of this stuff. So I'm going to try to sing about it. That hadn't happened yet. So I wrote the Pandemic Dance. I started singing songs about COVID, singing, there's certain things you cannot say, so sing them all instead, is a line from one of my songs called Oy Vey, Shut It Down. And that's what I started doing. I started singing because honestly, I was like, nobody is singing about any of this. People are getting banned everywhere. And I had a good run. My channel lasted a couple years through COVID. And then I wrote one song making fun of Fauci. I had my song, Oy Vey, Shut It Down, went viral. YouTube removed it. And I was like, fine, whatever. I kind of like wrote that song, I literally told them to shut it down in the title. I was like, come on, shut me down, right? Like it was like a challenge. And but then I wrote a song called The Speed of Science, mRNA, The Speed of Science, where I basically just mock Fauci in a catchy, fun way. And that's what ragtime is, right? Ragtime came, here's a ragtime history in a very brief nutshell. Ragtime is America's first genre that we came up with as Americans. Before blues, before jazz, before bluegrass, before swing, it was ragtime. And what was ragtime? It was bouncy, fun, catchy, syncopated, ragged rhythm that you could dance to, but it sung about real shit. It sung about the hard knock life that we all had to deal with. But it, not to hate on the blues, because there's some good blues, but blues is more kind of like, oh, I lost my baby. I'm feeling sorry for myself. Oh, what am I going to do? Right. With ragtime, it's more just like, hey, I lost my baby, but fuck her, like, so there's something about the ragtime that gives you this bouncy agency where you can sing about how shitty the world is, but you don't really resign yourself. Like you put one foot in front of the other. That's what it is. Right. So with this music is really effective way to satirize the status quo, the powers that shouldn't be, because people like a catchy song. They don't want to have to feel sorry for themselves all the time. I mean, blues can only get you so far. People want to dance. They want to have something that they can latch onto and not feel doom and gloom and sorry for themselves all the time. So what ragtime does is it offers you that jumpy, bouncy fun. And that's why we see video games, Mario and all this stuff. They use all this ragtime stuff because it keeps you engaged. It keeps you're dying every 2 seconds, but you want to come back for more. And you're like, dun 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 dun. This is all ragtime, right? All that original Mario music, 100% ragtime. Okay. So what I found this nice formula where I figured if you tell everybody doom and gloom, Fauci's killing us all, a lot of normies will just shut down. They're just like, shut up. I don't want to hear it. But if you give them a little jingle and you have a twinkle in your eye and it's like, I'm singing like, oh, Fauci, did that jab ever work? Oh no, it never did work. Like it was a little fun little thing. People are more receptive. Right. And so I had folks back when I was still on YouTube being like, I think anti-vaxxers are crazy, but this song is actually kind of fun. Right. So it's a way to bridge the gap. And I get people that are in the conspiracy world or that are very right leaning. They might say, why are you doing this like piano fag musical kind of thing? And I'm like, look, first of all, that's just my personality. Right. But second, we need to be able to reach the other side. They have been created this fake monopoly that art and musical theater and this type of expression is a purely liberal left-wing thing, when honestly, that's not the history of it. If you go back to, it was based, like you go back to Greek times, and like they would have plays and they would kill the emperor and shit, right? Like even the Shakespeare stuff, who I don't think it was written by Shakespeare, but it was a way for the masses to have an outlet in a world of bullshit and inequality. The court jester, right? The court jester is so important for the masses, but also for the king, right? Because the king wants the court jester, because the court jester can actually make fun of the king to his face. He's the one that's allowed to do that. And that provides this pressure valve for the masses. So you need the comedians, the satirists, the jesters in a stable society, right? So that the masses don't boil over with their frustrations, right? And what did we see in the lead up in the woke pre-COVID and the woke culture and people getting canceled, things were starting to get really bad, was they came for the comedians. They started canceling the comedians and the jesters. Is to get us ready for this new technocratic system, this new tyrannical technocracy, essentially. And so folks like me, who had not a big following, but I was more in the normie world. I had been touring with a really well-known band called Postmodern Jukebox. I sold out for a few years. I needed to sort of check that mark, and it was a great experience. I got to go around the world. I got to play Rachmaninoff music in Russia. I got to play Grieg, who is a Norwegian composer. I got to play him in Norway. Like, it was the best experience of my life to be able to do that and tour the world. But they came for folks that were in the normie sphere, who were then causing the normies to question, right? So I had that song in 2022 go viral about Fauci. I was getting hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube, calling out the vaccine. You don't do that in 2022. So they totally nuked my channel. 16 years of my work, 1,000 videos, but basically my life work. I dropped out of college to become a rock star, and kind of did, but then sort of developed my own system on YouTube. I mean, that's what the whole idea behind this beautiful moment that we had in before social media kind of ruined everything. In the early days of YouTube, 2006, 2007, when I was just putting my stuff up there, it's kind of like it was actually YouTube. It was actually an opportunity for someone like me to get myself out there. And heck, I joined a famous band and toured the world and started playing in ragtime music festivals. I met my mentor, Tom Breyer, who's the greatest living ragtime pianist and composer, and I got to work with him for several years. So all this was a wonderful door opening for me. Of course, it would never happen that way today. But so they came for all these voices like mine. Not to say mine was large or anything, but it was big enough where it was making an impact. And then they nuked my channel, no explanation. They keep denying the appeals even today. They never said why. But for 2 years after, you could not upload my Speed of Science, even a clip of it, without getting a strike on your channel for medical misinformation. So I know that was a big one. And then I got fired for living in Santa Cruz for not being vaccinated. I was a church organist, a salaried church organist is a big position for 15 years. They fired me for not getting vaccinated. I was teaching kids choir and in musicals. I then was fired because they wanted masks while singing, even as late as 2023. So people are like, oh, COVID only lasted 6 months. I'm like, fuck you. No. They're trying to like rewrite history here. In late 2023, I was fired again for asking if my students could sing without a mask. And they're like, oh, no, you questioning masks, so you're fired. I got fired from UC Santa Cruz for my online videos, singing about this stuff. And then again, I was musical director for a local theater company where I was literally directing 2 musicals at once, which was crazy, conducting and everything, teaching hundreds of kids. And I got doxxed again, and they fired me again, just last year. And again, so I'm not saying, oh, woe is me. Like I'm putting the stuff out there online, but it's frustrating because it's never like the job that I'm doing. I always do a really good job at it's not the people that I'm working for. It's random assholes that are doxing me online, and they're calling them up and they're threatening. They're like, we're going to go to the news if you're hiring an anti-vaxxer, transphobe, anti-Semitic bigot. And I'm like, look, this satirical satire used to be part of society. Like, you go back to the 50s and 60s, this folk music and all this shit, like, it was hip to challenge it through these things. Like, one of my big influences is Tom Lehrer. And he's still alive, incredibly. He's a satirist. He writes, used to write satire songs, very popular in the boomers generation for the 50s and 60s. And he was singing about all this shit. He had a song that was like, everybody hates the Jews. Like, he was joking about all of this, but the whole point was it was supposed to be funny, right? Like, you were supposed to be able to joke about these things, and people laughed at it. And me, I did exactly what he does. In fact, he was even more extreme in some of his songs. And yet I'm the same people that grew up loving to listen to this old stuff, hate it today. They cannot stand it. This type of humor is not acceptable. I'm like, why was it appropriate when you were kids and not? I grew up watching South Park in the 90s, and South Park kind of went in a bad direction. But in the 90s, dude, they were making fun of everybody. And like, that's what I grew up with, right? So I grew up being able to do that, thinking that was part of what comedy was, including laughing at yourself and your own culture. And that's what ragtime is so fun. And that is viewed as this racial thing today. But actually at the time, it was a thing that actually brought Black and white cultures together, because all the early ragtime pioneers were both Black and white. And it was something that they could relate to in a time when things were rough, right? In the post-Civil War era. And they found common ground in these cultural movements and moments. And ragtime was the perfect example of that. And it quickly got taken over and turned into some more degenerate stuff over the years. But I think there was this beautiful moment. So this idea of using comedy and satire and catchy music to challenge the status quo has been a part of cultures for thousands of years. And they went for it hard within the last 10 years or so, particularly in the last 5. And COVID was a great excuse for that. So I essentially lost all of my work, half a dozen jobs. I'm still dealing with it. And I try to just do what I can, but I might as well just lean hard into the songwriting stuff. So after my YouTube ban, I migrated to Twitter after Elon bought it. And then I was immediately banned by Elon's Twitter. Elon's after. And here I am. I'm like, oh, everyone's saying, oh, Elon is saving free speech. And I'm like, guys, he's not. And it was hard. It was horrible because I lost everything with YouTube. And then I was like, I'm going to start again on Twitter. And then I lost it all again on Twitter. And then I had to, I said, move on. In fact, I figured that Foundering was dead because I had nothing left. And I got a new job working for the musical theater company. And for some crazy reason, because Twitter never explained why they banned me in 2023. It was ridiculous. And they brought me back on October 7th. That October 7th. And in 2023. And while everyone is freaking out about the Israel thing, October 7th, all of a sudden my account is restored and I'm immediately doxxed. Someone immediately doxes my Twitter account to the musical theater company that I finally had moved on and gotten a great new job on. And I didn't have to worry about it because I had been banned off the internet. I'm like, phew, it's all gone. And all of a sudden, October 7th, it all gets brought back. All my videos are back. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And all of a sudden I get a call from my job. And they're like, oh, we've gotten reports that you have, anti-Semitic, anti-vax content on. I'm like, bro, how did you even find, anyways, I think it was an inside job from Twitter. I think they brought me back and an employee doxed me. I have no proof of it. But I can't see how it would happen any other way, especially that it happened on October 7th, right when people were freaking out about anti-Semitism. And so I lost my job again. And then I still back on Twitter, but I'm my account is heavily controlled. I know it's shadow banned and all that, yada, yada, yada. So boom, I caught you guys up. I know I've been blabbing on forever, but there you basically just got my life story right there, and how I am doing what I'm doing, and why you are talking to me, and why you are playing my music, which I really appreciate. And you have been in the belly of the beast living here in Santa Cruz, and I love this place. People are like, why don't you move? And I'm born and raised here. I've got aging parents here. I've got my networks here, and I still get occasional gigs and works with jobs. I can't really talk about it because I will get doxxed and then fired again from all this. But it's retarded. But I'm here behind enemy lines as far as I'm concerned. And I think there's a lot more based, awake people and aware people out here than people realize. Like, there is hope for areas like California, as bad as it really is. And it's just frustrating to have, especially gone through COVID and like 3 years of them putting caution tape on the freaking playgrounds. I'm like going out there every day, pulling that shit off. And like, it was just wild to live through. So I'm never going to forgive and forget what they put us through, having been in the worst of it. But I'm very proud that I'm very sad that I lost 16 years of my work on YouTube. Sad, RIP. But I'm proud that I didn't just conform and I actually spoke out. So there's my 2 cents. There's my story. I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome, man. Really cool, interesting background. I would say very. You talking about COVID, not forgiving and forgetting. I can relate to some degree, losing, like jobs and all this, but it's like doors open in the same light, like doors open, opportunities open, and the truth just kind of keeps rolling. So it's cool to see you still on your feet, still doing your thing, and that's awesome.
Well,
just quickly, one of my favorite people who was also in Santa Cruz, co-founder of Food Not Bombs, Keith McHenry, so very good friend of mine.
He's in Santa Cruz?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Aptos, but he works out of Santa Cruz. He's been federally unemployable since 2002. And in 1989, Food Not Bombs was designated a domestic terrorist organization by the FBI for feeding homeless people. And like, seriously, if you haven't connected with Keith, you should. Also, names escaping me at the moment, but he's part of a band that was called the Funky Fathers, and they put out an album called the Super Spreaders of Liberty. They're also down in Santa Cruz. So I understand what you mean. I do. I was up in Boulder Creek. It was a little bit easier for me.
That's a good spot up there. Felton, Boulder Creek. Yeah.
And I was doing like, home remodels and, all the decks and, outside. The only time I needed a mask is if I was sanding drywall or something like that, when it would make sense to put one on. And my favorite part was going into the bank, pulling up a bandana over my face and tying it around there, because that was the only way they were going to let me in. But like, other than that, man, I didn't really have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard being in the educational system and working with schools, and like, because they went really crazy, right?
Yeah.
So but like you said, like opening new doors, I like that. It's a great way. It opens new doors. And I can see it in my own life where I had family members who were normies, essentially, no offense, right? But before COVID, and then having lived through it, they're like, they hate Fauci. I see it in my own life where this transition happened. And even in the thick of it, as things were at the worst, I'm like, this is good. They've gone too far. They've gone too hard. Like, I was always expecting a fake pandemic event in our lifetimes, a big one. I didn't think it was going to be on the scale. Like, I feel like it was not meant to go as hard as it did. And then I think people surprised even them at how willing they were to just believe just end what we have been building in civilization for the past 2,000 years was just completely. I think the pandemic planners were surprised by that. I mean, I'm sure they war gamed it a bunch to sort of and had lots of different possible outcomes, but I think that they went too hard and people were too mind blitzed. And even like, I think they needed something to get people out of it. And the Russia-Ukraine thing was perfect. Like, what did we see at the, I think it was the height of the Canadian trucker protests, which were awesome, by the way. My kid and I, we were just watching YouTube footage of that amazing event. And of course, Trudeau cracked down hard and the optics were so bad. And you like trampling old ladies with horses. Yeah. And that was a moment when the world was like, wait a second, what is going on here? And what did we see that night? Or the next day, Putin invaded Ukraine, bro. Yep. And it's like, holy cow.
Immediate change.
It was immediate. And because people were so flustered and had that mass formation with COVID, it needed to switch to another thing. And then all of a sudden, it was the Ukrainian flags went up in the bios. And COVID was still a thing, but it wasn't really a thing. Like that was the kind of the end of COVID. And then we had a new thing to sort of move towards. And then now that the Russian Ukraine thing is petering down, Trump's back, right? So now we have a new outlet for this. You know, I'm not to say that Trump is a good guy, right? But I'm saying that they need these cultural moments to happen so they can distract and take the the energy of the common person, essentially, it's like a parasite. It's a parasite thing, I guess. The fear that is generated and the distrust of the neighbors and getting rid of church so that you can't go and talk to people and being like, hey, something's wrong here. So every time that it's for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So like you're saying, opening new doors. I wasn't really happy with the way that my life was going. I had left the band that I was touring with, and we were working locally, but it was not being fulfilling. I was part of a system that I didn't like. And then now I feel totally liberated, and I'm not like financially stable, but I'm emotionally more or less, at least spiritually, I feel better than I was before.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. And I we were talking about this at a Saturday group, but like kids and parents and kids in schools, like there's a lot more homeschooling. There's a lot more drawback from government dependence, like people's eyes waking up to, wow, we went from COVID, COVID's going to kill you 100%. We went from vaccines work 100% to you need 15,000 boosters, to Ukraine, to October 7th, to what the fuck is happening next? You know?
And we tried to go in. I got a fake press pass, and we tried to go into a Tim Walz rally that was happening at a pizza place by Georgia Tech. And we stood in line, and we got up to the front, and he was dressed like it's the only time I was able to get Josh up really, really early is because he could make himself. He was excited about making himself look so beautiful. and so we get to the front of the line, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, we signed up. And they were like, oh, as a press, yeah. And I showed them my fake press pass. And then they ended up getting a whole team of people because they were trying to find my name, which I knew wasn't there. Yeah. They just trying to find my name there. And then finally they were like, one guy was like, we just can't do it. We can't do it. And I just kept looking over at Josh, like he was brokenhearted, because while they were doing it, I kept looking over him going, I know that you've been wanting to meet Tim Walz for so long. I hope everything's fine, honey. Because Tim Walz, he is a trans guy. And they made us leave. And so there's a long line of people, and we're walking by this long line of people waiting to get in. And I'm just shaking my head going, they kicked us out because she's trans.
That's funny. What? No. That's so funny. Well, it's funny. You get the astroturfed reality on the left, which is very transparent, right? But then, of course, the right sees that and goes, "Well, they're lying to us." So then we have to mobilize and put out like Elon Musk, like, we'll fund you to vote for X, Y, and Z, and that's totally legitimate in response to the left doing it. I'm clearly being ironic, being facetious, right? Like, it's insane to me how they always rationalize, like the same thing with like the constitutional thing today. Like, well, they didn't give January 6th due process, so then do the same thing to people you claim the Democrats are using. Like,
Yeah.
where's the fucking logic in any of that? It's the same thing. Is there every side of this game right now is being, where they're, and I think it's the same, to be honest. I think we're using like the, RNC, DNC elements to just radically fund, people that still probably want to come out and support their side, right? But they paid and bust people in. And, we live in a really fake reality right now in a lot of ways.
100%.
And, on all sides of it too, which is so wild, is that one side is only ever capable of seeing the other side's problem, and it's like, that's, as always, that's the biggest block to us having any real change.
And they're so angry too that they're so emotionally charged up with propaganda that when it flips, like you're talking about, they're like, I know, I don't care though. I just want to get them. I just fucking get them.
And I get it though. Like you get, like I get that way sometimes where you get so, like right now you're reading these things and you're like going, God, how are they? Fuck. Like you're reading it, like, how is that happening? Like, how is he saying that thing again? And then what I think of those of us that are in this, we have to go, okay, wait. There's lying going on. There are bots everywhere. Like, let's make sure I'm not falling into that, but even I, every day, it's like, so you get how average people can get so ramped up, like their cortisol levels at a peak for like a week straight, just like never ending. So they get emotional. The emotions win the day. I think that's important.
I'm in a chat group with two guys that are huge progressive, and one of my friends who he can't help but provoke them, and I'll wake up 8 a.m. to just endless ding dings, and they're just having arguments where it's like they're in separate rooms and they're both just repeating talking points from they might not realize they are, but from like activist emails and what they've absorbed from the media they take in. And it's just like they didn't listen to anything the other said at all. And I don't ever jump in because I'm like, it's going nowhere here. You guys are just going to be mad at each other for 2 days after this, apologize, and do it again next week.
Right. And that's the incredible part is, like you're saying, like they're not, like it's almost, and it's not almost like this happens point blank online all the time where you'll put out a response or something and they'll respond to something. They're like, did you even read my response? They're responding to what like they think you're going at.
Stereotype. Yes.
From you. Yeah. Right. And that is constant. And so that, obviously is not conducive to any real conversation or outcome. And I think that's by design, but you're right. It's emotion over logic.
Right. And it pisses me off too, because I can't stand Nancy Mace. Every time she talks, her tits lose more power over me. and like, I make fun of her all the time. And there'll be people sometimes in my comments thinking I'm like a progressive. I'm like, no, I'm like, I don't, Nancy Mace is just like a lot of them, a grifting bitch who she can't take a fucking picture without her tits. She'd be like, look, I'm saving a dying child. It's like, I can't see the child over the tits in front of the camera. Oh, is that the child in the background and fuzzy? Get your tits out. I never thought I'd be begging for less tits.
These are strange days. They are.
Have you guys seen the you bring it up, the Nancy Mace thing going around?
I have. She might as well have been screaming, rape.
Wild. Do you think she did that? Do you think that's really do you think that was her making a scene to make momentum?
100%. I think she was, because she actually tweeted about the video shit, how she's gonna putting people on notice before that happened. So and weird. That guy is an annoying, indivisible activist because they are trained to do that. But he was like very far away from her, and she's going, "Get out of my face!"
Yeah, I'll grab her.
Yeah.
What's weird though, what's weird though is that is that guy actually like a podcaster or whatever? I saw some people making arguments. The bottom line is, regardless, unless there was some major thing that happened right before this video, it's clear that there was and the way he even responds, it's like he's like, I just asked you one basic question, and maybe that's not the truth, but the way she frames it is fucking insane. Like you're saying,
right.
She was assaulted or something, and then she went on Fox and reiterated the idea.
Totally,
with
100%.
It's weird, man.
If you haven't seen her testimony that she did, her testimony about the rape, where she just accused 3 people specifically of gang rape, with that, which she could do on the floor of Congress, knowing she has immunity from prosecution against any lies, like defamation against people. And she did this very theatrical thing where she pulled out a Bible and she did an oath, just to try and manipulate people who are watching it. You don't have to do that there. And that's when she was handcuffing herself to the fucking chair, like the weirdest shit. Again, oh my God, I'm getting raped. And then she's half naked, handcuffing herself to a chair. It's a weird message. But listening to that whole thing, that bitch is crazier than Britney Spears. And I feel sorry for whoever dates her next.
Yeah, and by the way, just so it's obvious, and this is just always what I'll do, is that no, I don't think anybody is arguing that we should ignore or disregard a woman's claiming she's been raped, right? But the idea is that clearly just as likely logical on the other side is we shouldn't blindly accept it either. That's the
100%.
weird world we live in right now, where it's like Kavanaugh, like believe women. It's like, really? Like, is anybody like, so they never could possibly lie? Like, it's such a weird, momentum that we get in these times. If you can play that one if you want. I'm going to try to find the Fox News one too, where she's talking about this, which is weird.
Okay. She stands up to bullies.
Yeah. God.
Okay.
I do them every year.
Every year.
You want to keep going?
Do any more this
you want
year?
to keep going and keep harassing me?
I'm asking if
You
you're
could
gonna
have
have any more
gone to a
town halls
dozen
this year.
town halls last year.
I asked if you're doing any more this year. It was one simple question.
Yeah.
Are you doing a town
I've
hall
already
this year?
done one. I'll do
Are
plenty
you doing
more.
any more this year? It was a simple question.
You're always invited.
Okay, sweet. We'll look
And
out
by
for
the
an
way,
actual invitation.
I voted for gay marriage twice. So I'm just saying, it has everything to do with
You
you.
think everything about me has to do with gay marriage?
I do,
That's
absolutely.
your first stance when you
Yep.
speak with me?
Absolutely.
There's no other humane
If you want to get in my
conversation you
face
can
about
have
town
me?
halls, you should have shown
There's
up to
no
one
other
last
humane
year.
thing you can talk about me just saying, oh, I support gay marriage.
Yeah,
That's the
because
only
you're
thing
getting
you
in
have
my
to
face
say.
about a town hall. You
All I
could have
just
gone
asked you one
last year.
simple question from right
Would you
over
like
here is
me?
if you have any plans to have more town halls this year?
I have town
That was
halls
one
every year.
question.
I have over a dozen
Okay.
every year.
Great. That was my entire question. You didn't have to go
Yeah,
into the spiel about
you could
everything
have. You could have come to any of them last year.
And I'm
I had
asking you
over a
about this year, not
dozen.
2024. But
Where were you the year before that, or the year before that?
It was a simple
Oh,
question. I
because
asked
you know
if
what?
have
Because
any
you
more that
people
you're
on the
going to
left
this
are
year or not.
crazy.
So I'm
You're
on the left.
absolutely fucking
And you just
crazy.
go there.
I'm absolutely fucking
You are,
crazy.
and get out of my face. Goodbye.
Get out of my face. On the other side, get out of my
Fuck
face.
me. You're
Yep.
gonna be voted
Bye.
out so fast this year. I
I'm
can't
not.
wait for you to fucking
I'm not.
go into
I
the
won I'm by not. so I'm much. not.
disgrace this state.
She's a child. You know what I mean? Like,
Ask you a
it's just
simple
insane to me.
question,
Yeah.
Just to go on this tirade and tell me fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you.
Disgusting.
Get out of my face.
Fuck you. How about
Get out of my face.
You're a nasty
Try it
bitch.
again. What's your
You're a
name?
nasty bitch.
What's your
You're a
name?
nasty bitch. That's
What's
what
your name?
Say fuck me?
Yep, I
That's
sure
the
did.
first thing you're gonna say to me is fuck me. Asking you
Absolutely.
a
Get the
question.
fuck out of my face
Fuck
now.
That needs to be a
Fuck
meme
you.
right there.
He's literally on the
You can
other
take me
side.
on, baby.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck
All you
away
can
from
see
me.
is just the top of his head, like
That's what I
fucking
mean.
Elroy.
Right, that part with his head up the you're a nasty bitch. Like, that needs to be a meme right there.
Oh,
You could just
man.
put Squidward's freaking head over it.
That's just, I mean, of course-
Nose hanging over the freaking.
God.
And then all day since after that, if you come at me, I will stand up to you. Like,
Yeah.
very brave.
Seriously. I mean, well, and of course, the whole thing is, it's, clearly you could argue, I don't know, maybe he's not a Democrat. Who fucking knows? I know gay people that are Republicans. I know people that dress like that. It's like the assumption is because of the way he looks, because of the way he talks, which is just the kind of whole thing right now. It's identity politics, guys. Woke right, woke left, and it's so strange that's like, again, maybe for all you know, he yelled at her beforehand, but the weird way she frames that to go after him, like she's being threatened. And I kind of get the sense that just was her taking advantage. The guy was like, maybe asked in a snide way, like any more town halls coming.
I'm
Like,
sure he
and
did.
she's
Yeah,
sensitive about it.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just fucking went off on him. It's just so gross, And I think the problem is that's leaning into the lowest common denominator. They are
Yeah.
leaning into on both the left and the right, the most disgusting, radical, worst parts of their sides, and acting like it doesn't exist.
And that's exactly what these activists do. They're trained to do as well. Make sure you have your camera out. And in one of the trainings I watched, they said they called it bird dogging. We want to see police officers pulling handicapped people out of chairs on the front of the New York Times. So they put all the handicapped people at the front, and they refuse to leave until the cops are forced to pull them out, and you can get it on camera and have a viral moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always trying to set up your moment for in the way but in some ways it goes back and forth where you're abusing the weaknesses of the other side. And the bottom line though is like we always have to look at all of this like. It's the same point. Question everything, right?
Yeah,
Any moment in this can be astroturf, can be lied about, especially today, if not fucking all of it. Like
Yeah.
I know that I'm never the one to assume that, or I would never even argue that it's just like literally all fake. But I've never been at a point in time where it's been more possible, right? Like
Totally,
it could
yeah.
be. That's how weird it is today.
I mean, for all we know, they left that beauty store and went and fucked.
yeah, right. Or it's like her neighbor, and they're like, "Yeah, great job." Like,
The second though they think you're on their side, though they'll tell you anything. They'll you put on that a White Dudes for Harris shirt, or the story I made up the last time was I said I'm from Georgia Southern because that needed to be an indivisible group that wasn't close enough by that they would know me. And I was like, yeah, we're from a little indivisible group down at Georgia Southern, and we're just doing what Lee and her husband, the dude that run it, say in the videos. Say we're just documenting everything so we can send it to the National Indivisible group and just get the message out. And I always talk a little gay, to fit in. And as soon as you do that, they're like, oh, yeah, great. Thank you for what you're doing. And they're like, have you seen the guy? Like, one of the guys, I can't remember his name, but he's running for a seat in Cobb County, which is where I am. And something Allen. She's like, have you seen Allen? And I was like, no, I haven't seen him yet. And she goes, he's black. We love him. And I was like, we love the blacks. Thank goodness, And it's just like, I'm like, they don't know they're the racist ones.
Wow.
We love the good blacks.
Right? He's one of ours.
I know, yes.
Oh my God, dude. No, the casual racism in the Democratic Party or the progressive left is hilarious to me. Like, just how completely fucking oblivious they are to their own open, blatant racism has never not made me laugh. It's made me like, wow, before. But
I know, dude. It's like, that's so insulting. That's like legitimately insulting. So some people I know, these progressives, will just, the other day, they were talking about fucking DEI shit. They were arguing with my other friend, and one of them was like, well, I'm pretty sure Raymond would have something to say about DEI getting cut. And Raymond is their only black friend, the only black guy they know, who grew up in a rich white liberal neighborhood and talks like the whitest person you've ever heard. So that's their black guy reference. And he's a puppeteer in Hollywood movies. He's a fantastic puppeteer. Nothing about DEI is why he got to be where he is. He's been a puppeteer, a great one, his whole, like, ever since I've known him. And I've never been like, oh, he's only doing this shit because he's black, But to them, they think that that's how he got to be where. I'm like, what? That's fucking that's an insulting thing to say about your friend Raymond.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's fucking nuts, dude. The whole thing, like, it seems like the whole thing is, that's part of the programming too, is to be, molded into this completely unaware, out of touch,
blind, yeah, dude.
Just, and I'm sure they're, I'm sure they're unaware of just how blatantly racist
they're completely unaware. And they're so condescending in the way they talk about black people. They think that they have to, like, we have to do it for them. We have to raise their voice. I'm like, dude, the real black dudes, like, I play basketball my whole life. You've never met like real black dudes. They would think you're fucking gay as shit for saying everything that.
Yeah, and would probably open hand slap you across your head.
Totally.
I mean, dude, Ryan T-Lab sent me this clip, and it's Jeffrey Sachs and Judge Knapp talking about just how blatantly America has sold out to the Israel lobby. And I think he wanted it to get, not to shift gears too hard, man.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling this is going to be worthwhile at Spark. How much time you got, by the way?
I have a few more minutes. We can check this out.
Okay.
The Israel now, what I like to do is whenever people just say Israel, I'm just like, you fucking dude, fuck Israel. God, come on, dude. So to get really angry at them.
How's that working out?
No, they're like, what? I'm like, you said it. Did you said you're the Israel?
You're not allowed to say that.
The hold of the Israel lobby on American politics is so frightening, so terrifying. that anything is possible to drag the United States into yet another war. Our politicians have sold themselves to the Israel lobby. They're on the take. They take big bucks. They get big bucks. By the way, not only from Jewish Zionists, but from Christian Zionists. So just to understand, this is a lobby that wants to turn American policy over to Israel. And it has effectively done that for 30 years. The U.S. has gotten dragged into one war after another because Israel has said so.
The Israel lobby in Washington is apparently working in overdrive. The White House announced just about an hour ago the appointment of someone I've never heard of. Her name is Merav Seren, first name Merav, surname Ceren, to head the Iran-Israel desk on the National Security Council. Now, you might say, well, who is she? She's a joint United States and Israeli citizen and a former official of the IDF. Why would Donald Trump authorize Michael Waltz to hire a former official of the IDF to purport
of the Israeli Ministry of Defense? Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. To purport to advise the President of the United States on Iran and Israel relations. What kind of advice does he think he's going to get from her?
You see, it's not even remotely subtle how the Israel lobby works. Why not just put Israelis into the National Security Council? we can cut out all of the middlemen, as it were. Now, who is she? She is Israeli-born, apparently dual citizenship, as you say. Apparently, I don't know that fact. She worked for the Israeli Ministry of Defense, no less. And then she showed up on Ted Cruz's staff. And this is how it works. Ted Cruz receives a fortune from the Israel lobby. A fortune. According to OpenSecrets.org, which records these things, in the most recent campaign cycle, if I recall the data correctly, more than $1 million from pro-Israel lobby groups. So basically, this is a scam operation. Our politicians have sold themselves out to the Israel lobby. They hire people who have
spies.
Well, I don't know what she
they
has.
hire spies.
She apparently is an Israeli citizen who has worked for the Israeli Ministry of Defense. Shocking enough, completely unacceptable for also for a president who says that his aim is America first.
Does she get a national security clearance? Can she see state secrets in her job at the National Security Council? She who must still enjoy some loyalty to the Israeli Defense Ministry?
No doubt. In Washington, everything's for sale.
Yeah.
Including American foreign policy.
All right. Let me stop it there. But yeah.
It's very, very anti-Semitic, the whole thing.
The whole thing just dripping with trope after trope.
Worse than the Holocaust.
Worse. Far worse. Worse than the Holocaust and COVID, and also like probably 4.5 hostages.
Right. Yeah. All the rape that's ever happened, it was worse than that.
Yeah. Except for the rape that the IOF commits.
That is justifiable. They're just self-defense. If they have to rape their way out of that situation. There's no other way out.
Yep.
Surrounded by a bunch of women who will kill them if they don't force themselves on them.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate fact that caused war. Right.
It's so people sometimes talking to people who are they see Israel in the biblical sense, and I'm just like, I don't know if that's. I think you can be a Christian and not support what they're doing right now, and it's that's another one of those things where it gets people to have kind of a blind spot of to be a Christian, I must support Israel at all costs, and therefore I must be okay with. I'll find people who are like great guys that kind of like roundaboutly saying, yeah, those kids are going to grow up and you know, they're going to be just like Hamas. I'm like, I don't know if that's really, I'm like, that doesn't sound like you in every other aspect of life. You wouldn't normally say something like that. Or they'll say, well, Israel has our values. And then I'll be like, do they? And I'll show them this article right here. Here, let me show you. You might have seen it, but I'll be like, remember when you hated COVID and all the stuff? And I was like, well, Bibi Netanyahu, he put the coronavirus vaccine on display in his office as like an award because he wanted to test the vaccine in his country, and their lockdowns were stricter. They were the vaccine nation. They talked openly about how they were going to make it impossible for people who didn't get it to participate in society. I'm like, is that the value? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, so maybe they don't have the values that we do. And it's just like, people can't be, I'm like, I don't empathetically, like, I hate war, but like, I can't get obsessed about that conflict because I feel like it's the same fucking people on both sides of it. And I was explaining to my friend, I was like, you know, Bibi Netanyahu facilitated all this fucking money to go to Hamas, to Qatar, and all this bullshit. And this isn't even something that they deny. And they're like, can you prove it? I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can literally look it up, and it's not something that's hard to find. And I finally got him to a point where I was like, hey, remember 9/11 was an inside job? And he was like, yeah. And I was explaining it, and he's like, oh, so it's like the CIA. And I was like, right. And you hate the CIA, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, now you see what I'm saying? Why none of this can be trusted, or why I don't just suck Israel's dick all the time.
Bibi came out immediately and said, this was our 9/11. Like,
I know, dude.
Get out there, fella.
Right. Times 10. It's like times 10. They're 9/11.
Yeah, because you know, and I'm not saying that Hamas didn't kill people that day. Yeah. But the numbers that the Israelis have been putting out don't account for all of the people that they now admit that they murdered due to the Hannibal Directive.
Yeah,
it was in open engagement throughout the entire day, overnight, carried over, and that's all been admitted to now. And so in that 1,200 figure that has been highly disputed since the first time it was announced, that there's zero accountants for on the part of the Israeli ministries that put out those numbers for people killed due to Hannibal Directive. And it's just so fucking disingenuous. And then every debunked lie that came out of that too, like there's helicopter gunfire over you, and you're gonna be like, hang on, need to rape a random festival goer.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting shot at from 15 different angles, you know, and you're like, man, I would love to shoot back and, you know, defend myself, but I got to get this nut.
Right. Right. Sometimes you're horny, and maybe you got some condoms and made you think the other side has really big dicks, so you got to prove yourself with some rape. But so like we were talking about this earlier, where it's like you can't criticize Israel without somebody going, oh, so you support Hamas. I'm like, no, fucking no, they're awful. What happened was fucking awful all around. But a criticism of one is not an endorsement of the other, and people seem to have a hard time coming to terms with that.
Yeah, no, I'm like, it's way more nuanced than that too, because people have equated everyone who's a Palestinian with Hamas. Like, right. Bill Maher does this shit all the time.
Yep.
And so, like, you can't even be with, I think that Palestinians have a right to live in their homeland without somebody going, those are Hamas talking points. And it's like, are you fucking retarded?
Right. It would be like if other countries perceived everybody in America as a Biden supporter or as a Trump supporter.
It's happened to me on Union of the Unwanted on my own show, where, you know, just going through Trump's record, I'll get, oh, so we should have voted for Harris.
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to anything I've ever said ever?
Yeah, dude.
You know, like, especially regarding that day drunk bitch.
That's dude. I'm not sure you're talking about. You don't have to tell me.
Well, it's Adam. It's been a handful of people. So it's
yeah. So like when people say that to me, I'm just like, that's why I don't vote. That's why I don't vote for the presidency. It's for that reason. As I'm not, even if I feel like I might like one of them, I'm like, I feel like that's probably designed to trick me. And so my safest bet on never voting for a pedophile is to never vote for a president, at least moving forward. And I haven't in a while. And they're like, well, then you don't have a right to. I'm like, okay, so that's the oldest fucking propaganda talking point ever, that you don't have a right to say anything if you don't fucking fall into the trap.
Right. You can only communicate while you're waiting to slowly die from the bamboo spikes that you're impaled on.
Absolutely. Yeah. People do like, so the logic of it is because they tell you just to get out and vote, like for this person, like it shouldn't be that get out the vote, you know, it should be get out and get informed, really informed, but they don't want that. So just fucking get out and vote instead of get out and actually learn some shit. And I want to do like a get out the don't vote campaign.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Because if nobody votes, the whole thing, then they lose their power.
I've been telling people for years, man, voting is the laziest and least effective direct political action anyone could ever possibly take. And the vast majority of the people that go in only knowing the talking points or propaganda from like specifically crafted narrative management.
Yep.
Yeah. And on whatever side, doesn't fucking matter. Yeah. And the people who think they're the most informed, poll after poll after poll after poll, are hands down the least informed across the board.
Completely. And they put the sticker on, you know, it's that get on the bandwagon with the sticker shit.
Yeah. The largest voting bloc in the U.S. is people who don't vote.
Yeah.
The second largest voting bloc is people who are registered as unaffiliated or independent or, you know, no declared party or anything like that.
It dwarfs them in size, and yet people are convinced they have to do one or the other.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the libertarians just get co-opted by a bunch of weird shit every time.
Dude, it's kind of been a parody for, I mean, ever since I found out about him when I was like 16. And, you know, I had older friends that were like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to vote libertarian because weed. And like, that was it. That was their whole platform.
Right.
Was they don't care about weed. So I'm on board.
Right.
You know, let's ride. And so the first time I voted, it was for, I think it was Bob Barr, in 96. And the last time I voted, it was for Cynthia McKinney, just because I fucking love that woman.
From Georgia, yeah.
Yeah. And they ran her out on a rail a couple of times. They did her so fucking dirty.
Yeah.
She's unemployable in the West. She teaches at East West University in Bangladesh. She's got a PhD.
Is that what she's doing now?
That's what she's been doing for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 years.
That's crazy, dude. Yeah,
unemployable in Western nations, and anyone who does like direct business with Western nations on a level that they could be like, no, she's not working there.
What did she do again? She called out the. I mean, she did a lot
called
of
out
stuff.
9/11, but yeah, I mean, like multiple times tried to lead.
That's right.
A genuine inquiry into 9/11, and fucking they ran her out so fucking quick, and then she came back 2 years later. Fucking the dude they got to replace her, everybody hated, and she just kept running around fucking Georgia, going, "Look, I was right about this.
Yeah.
Like, I got a bone to pick with these motherfuckers." She was back in for 2 more years, and they were like, "Nope, sorry, no more questions.
Yeah,
you gotta
yeah.
go."
Yeah, they kicked the black woman. I mean, they kicked her out, showing their racism.
Yeah.
Once
Well,
again.
that whole like Shirley Chisholm thing, where you know, if they don't offer you a seat at the table, bring your own. Like
Yeah.
Cynthia McKinney was about that life.
She brought her own fucking
she
table.
showed up with a whole fucking fucking tractor trailer full of chairs.
Yeah. Yeah, she was great.
So I've written her in, you know, just for funsies. The last couple and it hasn't been that many. Like sometimes I'll just go in because I've got somebody that I know and like running for school board or something like that. And so I'll show up just to make sure that their name gets filled in. But the rest of it is basically a, you know, cavalcade of fuckery.
Yeah, I think voting at a local level, if you're familiar with the candidate, I think that's perfectly fine. That's where you have the most power, and that's where they try and co-opt. That's what Indivisible's doing right now, is they're sending people to the win positions on school board meetings so that they can keep like the DEI stuff, so they can keep the trans stuff in opposition to what Trump's saying nationally. Which is, it's just so interesting that the progressives, some might call them commies, are using the libertarians' principles, or smaller government principles, this was of state power, against them, because many of them are so infatuated with the Trump show that they're not recognizing the infiltration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a whole fascinating fucking conversation. I know you said you had to get out of here. I don't want to keep you overtime.
I appreciate you having me on, man. I love your show.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's
Yeah,
always
dude.
a pleasure to kick it.
Yeah, and I love your intros and outros and just everything you guys got going. So, yeah, I always enjoy hanging out.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime soon and get you back on the show sometime soon. And as you know, I loved the carnival. Been telling everybody about it. I loved the show this past Saturday, the Saturday Night Anarchy.
Yeah, that's always a good time.
That was a lot of fun. I felt, you know, towards the end of it, I felt like a jerk for a minute because I can't remember who we're talking, but they were talking about having a little bit of a religious debate, and they started talking about the cycles of the sun and women, and I couldn't help myself to make like a period joke, very childish period joke. Sure. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. You guys are making philosophical points. I'm a dick. I'm sorry. Continue. I'm sorry. Yes, they were good sports. They were all very kind, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of smart people. So, yeah,
No,
man.
Always a good time. Well, shout out your show and anything else that you want to do. And thank you again for coming up and performing at Third Eye. And we'll do that. We're going to do that show again, but at a different time of year. Look, you were there for that part of the conversation Saturday. Like maybe potentially have a spot to look at than like Central Florida. Well, not necessarily Central, but like closer to the Panhandle area.
Yeah.
Outside of Jacksonville-ish. So it would only be like a 17-hour drive from Atlanta?
Well, it depends on the traffic, but if I can get
Long
around
time to
traffic,
get to Florida from Atlanta.
yeah,
Or at least down south.
I used to live in Jacksonville. It's taking about 6 hours from there to here, so not too bad. But yeah, I'm down, dude. I love it.
Okay.
Propaganda Report is the show on any podcast listening app. Propagandafight.com is my website. Freedom Act Radio, Brad Binkley on X, YouTube, Prop Report on Rumble. My links are all in bio of my X profile of where you can find all of my stuff. So check it out. And yeah, guys, thanks for a lot. I've gotten a number of new listeners and people getting in the chats from your shows, and I appreciate everybody coming in and livening things up. It's great.
Well, shit, man, you're welcome anytime. And yeah, dude, I always enjoy hanging out on your show. So hit me up whenever. Happy to do it. And yeah, we'll see you soon, my friend.
Hell yeah, dude. Later, man. Take
care, brother. Brad Binkley, everybody, go watch the Propaganda Report. It's a very fun show. If my girl is still listening, I don't play that clip because I want to smoke cigarettes. I play that clip because it's hilarious. So stop. Let's see where to go. I had a couple of things that I definitely wanted to talk about. That's funny. Oh shit, let me thank the producers here real quick. Because you guys do rock, and I do love the heck out of you, and we literally cannot do any of the stuff that we do without you. It's a value for value gig here. What that means, if you're newer to the show, is that that everything that you see, not just, you know, AM Wake Up, but everything that comes out on the AM Wake Up channels, which is quite a bit of stuff, it all comes to you for free. There's no outside advertising, there's no paid sponsorships, there's no subscribe to this to get that, or Patreon or anything. Instead, if you dig what you're seeing, conversations that we're having and all the other stuff that comes with it, then there's multiple ways that you can demonstrate that. And most important things that we need from you are time, talent, and treasure. Time and talent, because it's like just me doing all of this stuff, which is overwhelming. So, you know, I don't have enough hours in the day or available resources to just float it. So the most important thing you could ever do is share the show, tell people about it. If you make clips, get them out there. Drop them in the Telegram if you want them to go up on the clip channel. If you're not in the Telegram, get in the Telegram. Somebody drop an invite link. There should be invite links a couple of other different places, including the link tree in each and every description. Oh yeah, and treasure, because, you know, life runs on, unfortunately. So all of the direct donate links are in each and every description. Let's see. Oh, if you want to set up a recurring monthly donation, you can do so through the Ko-Fi link or the Gibson Go. I have seen a couple of Gibson Goes go through. Thank you very much, Debbie Wilson. I know you're one of those people. Let's see, with a recurring monthly donation. And if you've done that, let me know so I can, you know, shout you out as well. There's a couple other people that have. Let's see, Lily, thank you very much. Tinfoil Hat Girl, thank you. I think that's it for this morning so far. Which is, you know, what it is. No, that's not rain. I think it's supposed to rain today. Anyway, when Brad was still here, we were talking about, we had the article pulled up about Netanyahu's relationship with Pfizer. I did have this in the
We came out of COVID first. I described that in my book, My Conversations with Albert Bourla, Pfizer. And I persuaded him to give tiny Israel the necessary vaccines to get us out first from the COVID. And the reason I could do that is because we have a database, 98%, a medical database, 98% of our population has digitized medical records and little card. And anywhere you go in any hospital in Israel, north, south, doesn't make any difference. Boom, you punch it in and you know everything about this patient for the last 20 years. I said, we'll use that to tell you whether these vaccines, what do they do to people, not individual people, not with their individual identities, but statistically, what does it do to people with, meningitis? What does it do to people with high blood pressure? What is it? You know, you want to know that. So Israel became, if you will, the lab for Pfizer. And that's how we did it. We got it out and we gave the information to the world. Not only, it's been published in medical magazines and so on.
So monster on multiple levels. This shit's just gross.
Yeah.
Put me under all kinds of pressure. Let's see. Catherine Austin Fitts has a fantastic little 5.5 minute breakdown on like the bait and switch coming from the banks. I don't know if you saw this because she posted it, I don't know, 2-3 days ago. But teenagers. Isn't the cross-shaped sail a jib? It may be. It may be.
Yeah, for all the people in the audience who both understand UFOs better than my approximate description of a video that we couldn't find the link to, and who understand maritime stuff in that dynamic of ship sailing, like any disgruntled pirates who are just watching the show, they're just like, yar, yar, who are also into aliens. I'm really sorry for like the frustration of screaming at the screen that you had to experience in the last 20 minutes of this show. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Gomez, are you getting in trouble? Why are you looking at me with that face? That's your I didn't do nothing face. Anyway,
for those who haven't met Gomez, he has like, I'm gonna fuck shit up, and then I didn't do nothing face, and it's just toggling back and forth between those expressions pretty much all the time. Yeah.
He smiles a lot too.
Yeah, but that's him in between those phases is the smiling, and then he'll be in one of those phases.
Oh man, fucking goofball. Anyway, let's go to Catherine Austin Fitts for a moment, or 3.
If I'm right, the way this reads to me is the bankers have decided that Trump's their man to get the control grid for them.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the other faction, they can't, you know, they're not going fast enough. They're not making headway. So they're going to use Trump to get the control grid. So they're going to back him for president. That's what I believe happened. So, and if you look at the speed that they're moving to build the control grid, it's astonishing. Yeah. So, Stargate, of course, is to put the data centers in place. The challenge you've got in an all digital financial or transaction system is the energy usage is frightening. Yeah. I mean, I don't see how we get from here to there, because I think the energy use, unless you finally bring in breakthrough energy, which they could do if they had complete control, I don't see how it works. There's one article in February in Bloomberg saying Texas, for its data centers, was going to need 30 new nukes.
Wow.
Right. Can you imagine? So, yeah, and they want to remember BlackRock wants to move the stock exchange down there. So, anyway, so Stargate, within a couple days of the new administration, they announced $500 billion for data centers, right? And then the continuation of mRNA injections, which, of course, I believe is the Internet of Bodies. Yeah. So if you don't understand what I mean by that, go. Purdue has the center on the Internet of Bodies, their engineering school. So go.
I've been reading about this.
Yeah. So they announced, okay, data centers and Internet of Bodies. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then they're pushing the digital ID like crazy. And they just did a new executive order pushing the digital ID. They're trying to get everybody on the real ID system. So the first thing you need is that digital ID, but then you need the data center infrastructure to back up and deal with all the data. Okay. Now, in the meantime, another very key thing you need the central bankers to control fiscal policy, which means you have to finish destroying the civil service. And I would say Doge is, they are working hard to do that. Doge is a much more complicated story. They're trying to get the current expenditures down, and if you're going to go from a unipolar model to a multipolar model, there's all sorts of expenses that are a total waste.
Mm-hmm.
So Doge is trying to cut expenses, and I think engineer a switch to corporate contractors running everything in the civil service, basically not being there to implement congressional will. So you're moving fiscal policy into the control of the bankers. And as a practical matter, it's pretty far that way now, because we're running at such big deficits. The minute the central bankers decide to turn off the money, everything stops. So
Yeah.
Trump is completely dependent on two characters. He's completely dependent on the central banking system and the Fed, for his day-to-day provision to run the government. But from everything we can tell, this group is totally reporting to the Netanyahu syndicate.
Hmm.
And I won't call them Israel because, poor Israel, they're,
Yeah.
if you think we have a tapeworm, they've got the tapeworm par excellence. So, Netanyahu and his syndicate, if you look at what he did during the pandemic, he was killing more Israelis than, Palestinians.
Yeah.
So, that syndicate appears to be in total control day to day to day. And my concern is, Netanyahu wants Trump to engineer a war with Iran, and it looks like they're trying.
It does look that way.
Yep. And I, for the life of me, I don't see how they win. I think whatever they do, unless they have a pretend war, which, Trump has been known to do, that
The goal isn't to win, though. The goal is to make the war last as long as you can grease the self-perpetuating money laundering machine with the blood of locals and kids.
Yeah, it's an important caveat and interjection, basically, because it's a similar point of contention that I would have with how she frames things. Like, for the most part, she's doing an excellent job, like really phenomenal. But the premise of winning a war is sort of seeing war as the intervals in time when they rear their head above the surface.
Yeah.
But if you think of war as like a Pokemon evolution from one state to another, as you work with where the population is in their evolution of consciousness, so you can try and breed them like retarded house pets over and over again until they're so pugged that they can barely do anything, and they sure as fuck can't survive running out with the wolves. That's sort of the contemporary variant that war has emerged as, and it can't really be won anymore unless it's in a way where I guess it's like it isn't thought of as the intervals of eruption. It's recognized as the continuum that we live in. And Fitz would, I think, agree with that by and large. So it's just, but like we describe hot wars like the real or fake. It's like, what does that even mean? Because it's like, think of the engineering of the First and Second World Wars as, they were very real wars, but they were for fake reasons to create fake countries that would then become the reason for other wars later on. So it's just like, it's not even a criticism, I guess. I'm just dissecting the language of how we think of these things, and it's just one of those notes about how we're getting played, bro. It's pretty, Go ahead, sorry.
Well, at this point, I would like to bring in my good friend and co-founder of Food Not Bombs, the one and only and legendary Keith McHenry.
And thanks for having me, you guys. It's great.
What's that? Good to see you, man.
Woo. The lithium battery problem can persist.
I wanted to talk to you about that. I just want to point out this is my second guest from Santa Cruz this week, and I was stoked on that.
Well, and Santa Cruz is becoming the 15-minute smart city. They need those lithium batteries, and they are pushing lithium battery trip here like really intense, which I'm sure is happening everywhere. And then, so that a couple of, what I just put out a Substack, Anarchist Cook, or anarchistcook.blog, which is my WordPress, which is essentially the same as my Substack. Yeah, about the indivisible 50-51 movement here. And when you live in Santa Cruz, you get, just without even knowing what the heck is going on, just looking at the players, you could see that this was just like it, what one would think, sadly. And it's just a Democratic Party campaign rallies. And ours was led here on the 19th by Mayor Fred Keeley. So if your head of your government, who is a right-wing fascist Zionist, is leading your protest at the corner of Ocean and Water Street, then you know that something's up. And what is up is that Indivisible was started by two Zionists when Trump was coming to power the first time, and its goal had basically two fundamental goals. One was to get everybody to vote for Hillary Clinton, right? And that was the first goal. And then the second goal was to make sure whatever resistance to Trump that would be organic and real, which would be a challenge to the system that put Trump in power, would be absorbed in these phony resistance, pussy hat rallies. And then you would waste all your time there, and it would get all the noise, it would get all the media, it would, they would get you on their Bernie, Our Revolution email list, and then you would just find out that the entire, you've wasted your time and all your energy's there, and, and there was no Our Revolution or no whatever it is that the Democratic Party claims they're going to be doing. That, like the AOC Bernie oligarch tour was paid by oligarchs. There was Indivisible got a lot of its money.
Hang on, let's stay on that for a minute, Keith, because it was like one of the silliest things I saw the other week, where Bernie was kicking the thing off at Coachella, which is like trust fund kids of Lockheed and Raytheon and, the freaking law firm and, all kinds of, those are the trust fund kids that go to Coachella. Like, you couldn't have picked a more oligarch rich location to be like, we're going to fight the oligarchy,
Yeah, and then you looked at where the tour went. It never went anywhere where poor people were. That's for sure.
Did you see him getting screamed at by those two activists where they were just arguing over who was going to shut down the rally? It's like what it devolved into.
Yeah, it was really funny here because it was on Earth Day, right? And we had our Earth Day celebration run by the county this year. And boy, they were inept. And boy, if you're going to trust them to help you during any kind of emergency, you would be like, stupid. They couldn't even do the most basic things of running a street fair. It was kind of pretty unbelievable. But anyway, it was downtown, even though the traditional location of the benchlands was empty, and they control everything, so they put it downtown. Well, it's not probably not a coincidence that they blocked downtown streets for that, because they're actually going to start blocking all the downtown streets as part of the 15-minute smart city situation. And I think we're up to about 28 high-rise built luxury condos projects within the city limits right now. And they don't have parking garages equivalent to the people that would be living in them. And then, of course, they're going to have to rebuild a new hospital, but no one's talking about that, because if you actually put one human in every unit that is now being built, you would have probably about 20,000 more people living in Santa Cruz, and yet the hospital is to way beyond capacity, where people are like in the hallways and so on. And then, of course, we've got a problem of no water anyway. And if there's it's totally like this dystopian, insane thing that's happening. So then the mayor that led the Indivisible protest on the 19th, and all these Indivisible people were walking through, and boy, they did not want to come by my booth, because I was clearly concerned about the war in the Middle East, something that they conveniently ignored. You know, there's no hands off Gaza or hands off Palestine or hands off Yemen or hands off, but there is a hands off NATO because we do need a war with Russia, and there's a lot of Ukrainian flags, right?
Hold on. There's a hands off NATO. Like this is like a joke, right? It's like that's not actually a formal.
Nope, you can print out on the Indivisible website your hands off NATO sign to bring to the rally.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
That's an official position of because they're funded by George Soros gave them I think $3 million last year. They had $9 million total, according to themselves, in one of their three front groups. You know, so there's three different indivisibles.
I guess no, it's like the concept makes perfect sense to me, but that's the branding they chose is just hilarious to me. It's like hands off NATO. That's the actual expression. So it's like they treat it like it's the equivalent. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's incredible.
Hang on, Tease. I got you. This is from the Seattle Indivisible, but you know. Oh, that's hands off libraries, not hands off NATO. Where'd hands off NATO go?
Go to my just go to.
Wait, hang on,
dude. Like, but this is what protesting is now. It's like a copy and paste, swap the word. Like, here's the sign. Go to the place.
Yeah, no, it defaults.
It's not astroturfed. You're not being used. Hold this, wave it in this way, look that direction.
Yeah, there it is.
It's there.
Hands off.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
No, it's like. For people who are trying to do revolution on a budget in between raising their kids who are poisoned because of the state, you can kind of understand just getting roped up blindly into any
hands
number
off
of
Greenland.
Oh man.
Yeah, well, when you look, so you know, you look at the history of so you're not supposed to say George Soros funded this, which he did, as he's one of the oligarchs that did. Because he's Jewish and therefore you're anti-Semitic. That's what Steve, what's that guy that's a bigwig here in the peace movement? And that's what he accused me of anyway. Oh God, I forget his name now. But he, you know, because I pointed out that you know, that the Open Society. I mean, they're trying to claim that the Open Society Foundation, which provided millions of dollars to Indivisible, and that's only one of the oligarchs helping out, is somehow like this beacon of democracy. But I talk about how happy the U.S.-backed government in Georgia was to receive all this money to help overthrow the government of Georgia, and of course he did the same. To, you know, before both the Orange Revolution and the Maidan coup, and actually this professor here, whose name escapes me, he gets money also from them. So needless to say, you know, it's you know, that's his department gets funded for international studies at University of San Francisco, and anyway, so this is all tied together, you know, this whole crazy thing where you've got like the mayor who is, you know, there was like 250, 300 people came out to get a resolution at City Hall by the City Council, which are all Zionists, which are really rabid, intense Zionists, to have a resolution, you know, against the genocide in Gaza. Well, of course, they did not vote for that. They voted for world peace. You know, that was what their thing was. So then he's at the front of these, like, you know, Indivisible protests as the main dude. Well, on May 4th, he is going to be holding the banner in the parade that goes from City Hall to the same exact address, March to End Homelessness Parade. Now, the March to End Homelessness Parade costs the a big shelter, the only really homeless services thing with a bunch of money, $65,000 to march for about 20 minutes from one side of the river to the other side, and with the people that are responsible for the tormenting the homeless holding the banner, and like they're supposed to be protesting themselves, but they're not. And then the whole thing is an amazing scam. And you know, our town is ground zero for all the wars and everything. I mean, this is where the people, you know, we're Silicon Valley's, you know, bedroom basically.
Vacation bungalow.
Yeah, and you know, so yeah, it's really fascinating. So that you know, like the liberals here, for you know, our upstanding liberals like Fred Keeley, who is waging a horrible war against the homeless, is you know, also leading. So it's parallel. It's exactly the same thing as Indivisible. You create the protest of your own self. This couldn't be more controlled opposition. And like, so then I attended the first meeting, which is why I know it can't cost $65,000. It may have cost even more, but at least $65,000. Their top figure was, they said that it was $65,000. Could have been, and I don't know what they're paying for. The banner, I can get that same banner they hold at FedEx, which is where they got it probably, you know, for like $150. So I don't know what they spent the money on. One theory is that the people marching are employees of Housing Matters and that they're getting overtime, and so that they're actually paid protesters, which are protesting nothing. Like, what are they even saying? But it's the same thing as Indivisible.
Sounds like a sweet gig, Keith.
Yeah. Well, the poor people that
work double time and be like volunteer for that. Be one of the protesters, protesting yourself, protesting them, protesting themselves. I mean, like, come on, jump on the opportunity here.
I know, it's
we
really
could have
funny.
Mustache Keith, who's another guy. I just have like a bag of funny hats, so you can cash like 65 grand protesting the 65 grand that they had to pay.
What you do is you spray a little bit more pepper into that beard and your hair, and then you get like a box-shaped fur hat, or better yet, a tiny little hat, and you put that on. And you walk in and you're like, I'm here for a position and also to sign up for the protesting. And they'll be like, you're hired.
Darling, I swear I done rode every fence, loved every girl and whooped every son bitch. I turned on the radio and it blew my mind. Sounds like I'm the last outlaw alive, the last outlaw alive, the last of my kind.